Chapter 1837 Visiting the Hunting Grounds. Chapter 1837 Visiting the Hunting Grounds. After consuming the Golden Spirit Pill, Yuan wasted no time and left home, making his way to his new training area, the Hunting Grounds, where disciples go to hunt magical beasts. The Hunting Grounds was located about half an hour away from the residential area. While the surroundings were dense with trees and had the appearance of untamed wilderness, Yuan was still very much within the sect's boundaries. As he reached the entrance of the hunting grounds, Yuan was stopped by the sect elder guarding it. "Hold it right there. You're only a second-level spirit apprentice. The weakest magical beast you can find in the hunting grounds is at the 5th level. You should come back once you increase your cultivation some more," the sect elder warned Yuan. "I am aware of my lack of cultivation, but I still wish to enter the hunting grounds right now," Yuan said with a stern expression on his face. The sect elder narrowed his eyes and said, "What's the rush? You look like you became a disciple only very recently. You are almost guaranteed to die if you enter the hunting grounds in your current state. I may not look like it, but I actually have a lot of experience with magical beasts. It'll be fine as long as I am extra careful. If I die, then so be it. It just means I wasn't fated to live long." After a brief silence, the sect elder stepped aside, his expression tense as he lowered his head without uttering another word. It was as though he was trying to erase Yuan's presence from his mind, pretending that Yuan no longer existed in his world. "Thank you," Yuan said as he walked past the sect elder and into the hunting grounds. As Yuan stepped into the hunting grounds, the atmosphere shifted dramatically, almost as if he had crossed into another world. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the presence of wild beasts, an overwhelming mix that assaulted his senses. As he ventured deeper, the growls, roars, and movements of creatures echoed from every direction. Most disciples stepping into the hunting grounds for the first time would tremble in fear, their nerves betraying their unease. Even those who managed to suppress their trembling couldn't escape the sinking feeling in their stomachs. Yet, Yuan moved through the terrain with complete tranquility, his face showing no trace of fear or discomfort, as if he were merely enjoying a casual stroll in a park. It didn't take long for Yuan to encounter his first magical beast, a four-legged creature that resembled a pig. However, its appearance was far from ordinary. Its skin was a deep crimson red, and patches of black scales covered its rotund body, giving it an almost armored look. It didn't take long for Yuan to encounter his first magical beast, a four-legged creature that resembled a pig. However, its appearance was far from ordinary. Its skin was a deep crimson red, and patches of black scales covered its rotund body, giving it an almost armored look. Yuan tightened his grip on his spirit-grade sword, his eyes fixed on the magical beast. He remained still and focused, his body poised to react as he patiently waited for the creature to make the first move. The magical beast, which had been eyeing Yuan with caution, suddenly sprang into action. It kicked off its powerful hind legs, propelling itself straight toward him with surprising speed. Yuan, however, remained composed, not rushing to dodge. He waited until the very last moment, when the beast was almost upon him, before sidestepping with precise timing, effortlessly avoiding the creature's charge. Yuan had strategically positioned himself in front of a tree, so when he dodged, the magical beast crashed directly into it. If it had been an ordinary animal, the collision would have undoubtedly left it incapacitated. However, this was no ordinary creature, it was a magical beast with cultivation at the 5th level of Spirit Apprentice. The impact didn't just shake the tree, it completely knocked it down, sending splinters flying as the beast merely suffered a slight daze. Yuan didn't give the beast any chance to recover. Almost simultaneously with his dodge, he swung his sword in a swift, precise arc. The sword struck the magical beast squarely on the neck, but its tough, scaled skin prevented Yuan from decapitating it. The blade bit into the creature, but not deeply enough to deal a fatal blow. To Yuan, it felt as if he were back in the bamboo garden, trying to chop down the spirit bamboos as a mortal. Realizing it had been struck, the magical beast let out an enraged roar that echoed through the forest. Its fiery eyes locked onto Yuan as it turned and charged at him once more. This time, the beast moved with even greater speed. A trail of blood followed in its wake, staining the ground as it barreled toward Yuan with reckless ferocity. Despite the magical beast being 3 levels above his cultivation, Yuan remained completely nonchalant. He didn't feel the slightest hint of threat from the creature. In the end, its attack was exceedingly straightforward, lacking any complexity or strategy. Yuan easily sidestepped the charge with precise timing, making it appear almost effortless, before striking it in the same spot again, deepening its wound. After repeating the same process a few more times, skillfully dodging and delivering precise strikes, the magical beast eventually succumbed to its injuries. Its movements grew sluggish as blood continued to pour from its wounds, and finally, it collapsed onto the ground, unable to move any further, completely drained of strength and life. After confirming the magical beast was dead, Yuan wasted no time and began butchering it with his sword. He skillfully collected its skin, bones, and even its meat, knowing that these parts could be sold for points. He had confirmed this earlier during his visit to the point store. However, Yuan's primary goal in the hunting grounds wasn't farming points, it was hunting for monster cores for his cultivation. Collecting beast parts for points was merely a secondary task to make the most of his efforts while he pursued his true objective. Once he was finished, Yuan continued wandering the hunting grounds for his next prey. Chapter 1838 The second participant to enter the Immortal Monastery. Chapter 1838 The second participant to enter the Immortal Monastery. After defeating his 7th magical beast, Yuan finally acquired his first monster core, and it even belonged to a 6th-level spirit apprentice magical beast. Although Yuan had defeated his first magical beast with relative ease, his subsequent encounters were far more challenging. Due to his lack of cultivation and weak body, there were moments when his body failed to keep up with his thoughts, leaving him vulnerable. This caused him to sustain several injuries during the battles. Fortunately, Yuan had prepared well, and his stockpile of recovery pills allowed him to quickly heal his wounds. Upon acquiring his first monster core, Yuan decided it was time to call it a day and return home. Before heading back, however, he stopped by the point store to sell all the materials he had gathered from the magical beasts he had defeated. Each magical beast earned him a little over 100 points, and had earned close to 1,000 points from selling the materials of 7 magical beasts, which would have taken him a week of chopping bamboo. However, while hunting magical beasts definitely earned points faster, it was unfathomably more dangerous. Out of curiosity, he checked the amount of points he could acquire from the monster core. 1,200 points, said the store worker. Although it was a tempting offer, Yuan kept the monster core and returned home with it. Once he was inside his room, he sat in the lotus position and held the monster core in front of him with both hands. This monster core should last me 2 weeks. Yuan muttered to himself as he began absorbing the spiritual energy within the monster core. If Yuan still had his original body and godlike physique, it would have taken him mere seconds to completely absorb the energy from the monster core. Unfortunately, in his current state, he had to cultivate like any ordinary cultivator, slowly and methodically drawing out the core's power. Now that Yuan had proper cultivation resources, he no longer needed to spend points to increase the spiritual energy around him, as he was already fully occupied by the monster core. Time flew by as Yuan immersed himself in cultivation. When he finally opened his eyes, 3 days had passed since he last did so. While he made significant progress in his cultivation, he was nowhere near a breakthrough, as Head had won very recently. However, Yuan was not discouraged and resumed his cultivation. While he made significant progress in his cultivation, he was nowhere near a breakthrough, as Head had won very recently. However, Yuan was not discouraged and resumed his cultivation. After another 2 days of cultivation, Yuan was forced to pause when his stomach began growling from hunger. While being a cultivator allowed him to partially sustain himself with spiritual energy, he wasn't yet at a level where he could absorb it quickly enough to fully replace the need for food. As a result, he still experienced hunger, though at a much slower rate than before. As a disciple, Yuan no longer needed to visit the cafeteria for his meals. Instead, he now had the privilege of having food delivered directly to his door, a luxury he genuinely appreciated. After placing an order, it wasn't long before old Zhai arrived at his living quarters, carrying a tray of food. As the aroma of the food wafted through the air, Yuan's anticipation grew. He couldn't wait to dig in, his hunger only intensifying with each passing moment. Just from the scent alone, he could tell that the quality of the meal was on par with, if not better than, the food he had enjoyed in the bamboo garden. It's been a week, young master. Have you adjusted to life as a disciple yet? Old Jai asked as he handed the food to Yuan. Slowly but surely, Yuan said as he sat down on his doorstep. Without wasting any time, he began eating his food right there, savoring each bite while enjoying the calm atmosphere around him. That's good to hear. In case you didn't know, another individual from the bamboo garden has recently arrived at the Immortal Monastery. Oh. Where is this individual staying? Yuan paused to ask. He arrived 2 days ago, and he's currently staying at Building 111. I see. Thanks for the information. Yuan quickly finished his meal within minutes. For future reference, you can just leave your empty plates on your doorsteps outside. Someone will show up to clean it up, Old Jai said to Yuan before carrying his empty plates away. After his meal, Yuan didn't immediately return to his cultivation. Instead, he made his way to Building 111 to see the individual who was recently promoted. Coincidentally, that individual was coming out of his building as Yuan arrived. I knew it was you, Ji Ran, Yuan called him out. Huh? Young master? A broad and relieved smile appeared on Ji Ran's face when he saw Yuan's handsome face. Yes, it's me. How does it feel to have your own body? Yuan smiled. Ha ha ha. Although it's quite the trash body and only temporary, it's still great to finally have a physical body after spending hundreds of millions of years as a wandering soul, Ji Ran said with a forced laugh. However, despite his attempt to mask his emotions with humor, Yuan could clearly hear the sorrow and pain laced in his voice. He gazed at his surroundings, his eyes reflecting a mix of nostalgia and gratitude, and continued, I never thought I'd be able to see this scenery again. It's like a dream come true. This is all thanks to you, young master, for freeing me from the Shadow Realm. Speaking of the Immortal Monastery, what do you think about it? Anything weird or seem out of place? Yuan then asked. I've only been here for a few days, and I haven't ventured beyond this area yet, so I can't say for certain, Ji Ran replied. However, everything seems normal to me. Do you sense something off? He shook his head and said, No, this place is just as I remember it. Ji Ran nodded before asking, By the way, how long has it been since you arrived at the Sect, young master? Chapter 1839 An Unexpected Encounter. Chapter 1839 An Unexpected Encounter. It's been a week since I arrived at this place, but I could have arrived 2 weeks earlier. I'm surprised it took you this long to become a cultivator, considering you already memorized the cultivation technique, Yuan said. Ji Ran scratched his head in an embarrassed manner and admitted, Honestly, I was taken aback by life in the bamboo garden and needed some time to adjust. I also failed my first quotas, which slowed me down a little. Although I was the sect leader, I have never actually stepped foot inside the bamboo garden until recently. Ji Ran was a genius who entered the Immortal Monastery through the entrance examination, so he didn't know what life was like for those who had to enter the sect through the bamboo forest. Although had heard of them before, he never paid any attention to them. After all, those who entered the sect through the bamboo forest were considered trash and not worth his attention. However, after experiencing the bamboo forest himself, Ji Ran had come to acknowledge, even respect those who had to endure such a life for many years just to become a disciple of the Immortal Monastery. What are your plans now? Yuan asked Ji Ran a moment later. I am going to focus on my cultivation for now. We only have 10 years to become an inner court disciple, he replied. While it's shorter than the 30 years we're supposed to get, we get more cultivation resources here, so it kind of balances out. What about you, young master? I will focus my cultivation for a little before I turn my focus to acquiring points, said Yuan. Points, huh? Now that you mention it, it might be better to focus on points since it has so many uses, and I can even speed up my cultivation with it, Ji Ran muttered. However, it's not easy earning points, and I don't even know where to begin. You can earn points by selling magical beast materials, especially their cores, Yuan revealed. Wait, there's only one place with magical beasts accessible by outer court disciples. Have you already gone to the hunting grounds? Ren looked at Yuan with wide eyes. Yuan nodded in acknowledgement. How strong are the magical beasts? Ren then asked. The weakest magical beast you'll find is at the 5th level of Spirit Apprentice. 5th level? But you've only just become a cultivator recently. Did you somehow retain your original body and talents? Ren exclaimed with a shocked face. No, but I did purchase a golden spirit pill with my points. 5th level? But you've only just become a cultivator recently. Did you somehow retain your original body and talents? Ren exclaimed with a shocked face. No, but I did purchase a golden spirit pill with my points. How many points did that cost you? 7,500, that's too expensive. I only have a little over 1,000, Ren sighed. After chatting for a little longer, Ren left to visit the point store while Yuan returned home to continue his cultivation. 2 weeks later, Yuan finally finished absorbing all of the spiritual energy from the monster core. However, he was only able to break through a single level, reaching the 3rd level Spirit Apprentice, and he was barely able to do so. Although he still had 5 spirit stones, Yuan decided to save them just in case. Since he had the capability to hunt magical beasts and monster cores, he wasn't desperate for cultivation resources. After taking a shower and filling his stomach, Yuan headed back to the hunting grounds for another hunting session. As he approached the entrance, his eyes fell on someone exiting the area. It was Ren, and his appearance was nothing short of pitiful. His clothes were tattered and roughed up, and his body was smeared with blood, giving the impression that he had been through a brutal ordeal. Why, young master? Ren almost instinctively hid his face after encountering Yuan. You don't look so good, Yuan teased with a smile. He sighed. I thought I would be able to hunt magical beasts since you were able to do it. However, even with my experience, there's no point if my body doesn't listen to me. I will need to temper my body before I can even think about returning to this place. Good luck, young master. Not wanting to linger with his appearance, Ren hastily left the scene. Yuan entered the hunting grounds shortly after. The sect elder watching the entrance noticed him but didn't say anything. Once inside the hunting grounds, Yuan wasted no time looking for magical beasts. However, even though he was confident in his abilities, there were certain magical beasts that he actively avoided, especially the agile ones. Oh. To find a monster core this quickly, how lucky, Yuan muttered to himself after getting a monster core on his first kill. After gathering the materials, Yuan continued his hunt. This time, he was prepared to stay inside the hunting grounds until his spatial ring could no longer store any more materials. A week later, after averaging 10 to 15 kills a day, Yuan finally filled his spatial ring to capacity with magical beast materials. Just as he was preparing to head back to the sect, he sensed a presence approaching him. The individual made no attempt to conceal their presence, which kept Yuan from feeling overly alarmed. However, his cautious nature kept him on alert, ready to react if necessary. Hey, what the hell are you doing? A feminine voice rang out. Yuan turned around to face the source of the voice and saw a beautiful young woman approaching him. When he saw her face, his eyes widened with surprise. Meanwhile, the young woman frowned deeply upon seeing Yuan. I knew it, she said, her tone sharp but laced with confusion. I thought I was seeing things, but it really is you. What are you doing wearing the outer court's uniform? And why are you still in the sect? I thought you had already left to prepare for your core disciple examination long ago. Disciple Tian Yang? Elder son. Yuan muttered her name subconsciously, his voice filled with disbelief. This young woman wasn't just any sect member, she was Elder son, a sect elder and someone Tian Yang was deeply familiar with, as she had saved his life on multiple occasions in the past. Chapter 1840 Not Tian Yang. Chapter 1840 Not Tian Yang. why aren't you answering my questions, disciple Tian? Why are you still at the sect when you should have left long ago? And pretending to be an outer court disciple, no less, Elder's son asked again when Yuan didn't respond. That's, I think you have the wrong person, Yuan eventually responded. The frown on Elder's son's face deepened after hearing his response, and she quickly said, what kind of nonsense are you up to now, disciple Tian? If you're going to pretend to be someone else, you should, at the very least, change your face. I don't know who this disciple Tian is, but my name is Xiaoyang, and I entered the Immortal Monastery not long ago, Yuan said. He had contemplated pretending to be Tianyang for a brief moment but decided against it in the end due to a gut feeling. Do you think I am stupid or something? Elder's son said, still not believing Yuan. You can look me up. I came from the bamboo garden not long ago, Yuan shrugged. Elder's son fell silent with a perplexed expression on her face. Then how do you know my name? If you're not disciple Tian, this should be our first time meeting, she said a moment later, referring to when Yuan subconsciously muttered her name out of surprise. I heard about you from someone else. They mentioned a beautiful sect elder protecting disciples at the hunting grounds and that I might run into you when I come here. Yuan quickly came up with an excuse. Elder's son coldly snorted at his words, but she didn't say anything else. After a moment of silence, she said, whatever. It's easy to confirm your words. I will give you one last chance to come clean. If it turns out that you're messing with me, I am going to give you a good beating. I wouldn't dare to mess with a sect elder, Yuan shook his head. Elder's son disappeared the next moment, leaving Yuan speechless. So Tianyang was a disciple at the Immortal Monastery during its earliest days, huh? I didn't think someone would recognize me. Yuan was truly shocked that Elder's son was there and even recognized him as Tianyang, as this had many implications. She mentioned the core disciple examination, which means Tianyang should be at the Desolate continent right now. However, since Elder's son is still at the Immortal Monastery, then that incident has yet to happen. Yuan recalled meeting Elder's son at the Desolate continent, so if she was still in the sect, it meant that Han Zexian's tomb had yet to open. Maybe I'm overthinking. This is a trial created by the Immortal Monastery's founder. It isn't too far-fetched to think the founder had recreated the people of his era with their memories intact to make the trial more realistic. Yuan shook his head and decided not to think too much about it. He left the hunting grounds shortly after and made his way to the point store to sell his materials. Meanwhile, Elder's son went to inquire about Yuan. He was telling the truth. Xiaoyang. Elder's son mumbled to herself, her voice barely audible as she stood frozen in place, her expression dazed. Why does he look exactly like Tianyang? Despite the evidence urging her to believe that Yuan was someone else entirely and only looked like Tianyang, she couldn't ignore the familiar feeling she got from him. Why does he feel so familiar if he's someone different? Even his demeanor was identical to Tianyang. No, his eyes looked much more experienced, but everything else is just like Tianyang. Damn it, why am I overthinking this? If he claims he's not Tianyang, then he's not Tianyang. Elder's son eventually convinced herself that Yuan was a different person. Meanwhile, at the point shop, Yuan sold all of the materials had gathered from the 91 magical beasts he hunted in a week and earned a little over 11,000 points. He also acquired 6 monster cores from the hunt, but he had no intentions to sell them. 6 monster cores will last me 3 months. I should also reach the 6th level by the end. Instead of spending his points, Yuan decided to save them for the next talent-boosting treasure, which cost a staggering 50,000 points. After returning home, Yuan made the decision to dedicate himself entirely to cultivation. For the next month, he would not leave his home, only opening his doors once a week to receive food from old Zhai. During this time, more and more participants would graduate from the bamboo garden and enter the Immortal Monastery. Lan Yingying was one of these individuals. If it isn't Lady Lan. Are you looking for the young master? Ji Ran coincidentally ran into Lan Yingying, who was wandering the residential area looking for Yuan. Unlike the bamboo garden, both males and females lived in the same area. I am. Do you know where he's staying? He's staying at Building 913. However, he's currently in seclusion, said Ji Ran, recalling what Yuan told him before entering seclusion. That said, you can probably still see him since he has to eat once a week. Lan Yingying nodded. Okay, I'll wait for him. Since Lan Yingying was one of the earlier participants to arrive at the Immortal Monastery, she was able to pick the building next to Yuan as her living quarters. A few days later, she noticed old Zhai approaching Yuan's living quarters with several plates of food. Seeing this, she hurriedly rushed outside and waited for Yuan to grab the food. Sure enough, when Yuan opened the door for the food, he noticed Lan Yingying standing outside his building. He smiled after seeing her and said, "I'm glad you made it out of the bamboo garden safely. Did anything happen while I was gone? Those participants who had been hiding in their homes to avoid you finally came out." "Other than that, not really," she said. Chapter 1841 50,000 points. Chapter 1841 50,000 points. What about the two divine beasts in your group? Did they also arrive at the Immortal Monastery? Yuan then asked. No, they're still trying to become a cultivator. It will probably take another month or two before they will arrive, Lan Yingying said. Yuan only paid for Lan Yingying's privilege of having increased spiritual energy, so it was only natural that she progressed faster than the others. Now that I am at the Immortal Monastery, what should I do? What is our goal in this trial? Lan Yingying then inquired. Honestly, I have no clue what our true goal is for this trial, but I am going to climb the ranks and become an inner court disciple for now since we only have 10 years to do so. What are the requirements for becoming an inner court disciple? You have to reach Spirit Master and earn enough contributions to the sect by doing sect missions. I see. Do you have any suggestion on what I should do as a disciple? This is my first time being one. Lan Yingying then asked. I would focus on my cultivation if I were you since the hunting grounds is too dangerous for you right now. Once you're able to hunt in the hunting grounds, you should focus on increasing your points to purchase talent-boosting treasures, such as the Golden Spirit Pill. I understand, Lan Yingying nodded. Lan Yingying returned to her living quarters to focus on her cultivation while Yuan returned to his own training. 2 months later, Yuan finished absorbing all 6 monster cores, boosting his cultivation to the 6th level of Spirit Apprentice. Before heading to the hunting grounds, Yuan visited the point store to replenish his supplies. At the hunting grounds, Yuan wasted no time hunting magical beasts. Now that he was at the 6th level, he could deal damage with less effort, allowing him to hunt much faster. I'm being watched. Yuan thought to himself. He could feel a presence observing him from the shadows, but he didn't detect any ill intent behind the gaze. It must be Elder Sunday. He had a feeling that she was still having trouble believing that he wasn't Tian Yang, not that he blamed her. Meanwhile, just as Yuan guessed, Elder Sun was watching him from afar. This Xiao Yang. He's slaughtering magical beasts with no effort, and it's not because of his cultivation. I don't know any disciple that's half as experienced as him in combat, and this includes the sect elders. Elder Sun was greatly shocked and awed by Yuan's combat experience. What little doubt Elder Sun had about Yuan's identity completely vanished after witnessing his combat prowess, as it was unfathomably higher than Tian Yang. Why would a genius like him enter the sect through the bamboo garden? With his talents, he should have no issue passing the entrance exam. Over the next several days, Elder Sun would follow Yuan around the hunting grounds to get a better understanding of his talents. After spending 4 days inside the hunting grounds, Yuan had to leave to sell his materials since his spatial ring was full. It took him an entire week to fill his spatial ring before, but it only took him 4 days this time. Upon selling everything in his spatial ring, Yuan earned a little under 13,000 points. It was a little higher than last time since the magical beasts he hunted were stronger than before. I have a little over 25,000 points at this time, so I am halfway to the next treasure. Yuan decided to purchase a few more spatial rings since they were quite cheap, and it would allow him to stay inside the hunting grounds for longer. Once he purchased his spatial rings and resupplied, Yuan returned to the hunting grounds and wouldn't leave until he acquired enough materials to purchase the treasure worth 50,000 points, which would take about 10 days. He's back already? Does he even know what it means to take a break? He's just like Tian Yang in this regard. Elder Sun couldn't believe her eyes when she noticed Yuan returning to the hunting ground so soon. However, as much as she wanted to continue watching over him, Elder Sun knew she couldn't babysit a single disciple for too long, especially knowing that Yuan was more than capable of protecting himself inside the hunting grounds. After taking another glance at Yuan's face, Elder Sun left to watch over the other disciples inside the hunting grounds. Meanwhile, Yuan spent the next 10 days hunting magical beasts without rest. During this time, he hunted over 300 magical beasts and collected 21 monster cores, 28 if he included the ones he collected before purchasing more spatial rings. After leaving the hunting grounds, Yuan went straight to the point store to sell the materials, earning more than he anticipated, 36,000 points. Then, he immediately spent 50,000 points buying the talent-boosting treasure called Enriched Roots of Vigor, a treasure that boosted his innate strength and widened his spiritual veins, allowing him to absorb and circulate spiritual energy faster with less effort. After purchasing the treasure, Yuan promptly made his way back home, eager to consume it. However, he didn't get far from the point store before a group of disciples stepped into his path, blocking his way. "How can I help you?" Yuan asked them, who didn't appear to be participants like him. "You can help us by handing over whatever you received from that building just now," said the disciple in the front. Yuan was speechless. He didn't anticipate that the disciples would attempt to rob him so openly. "You're just a bastard from the bamboo garden. You're not worthy of that enriched roots of vigor. It'd only be a waste on you. And what if I refuse? Are you going to attack me?" Yuan said a moment later. "Who knows? You can refuse and find out, but I would advise against that," said the disciple with a menacing grin on his face. Chapter 1842 Enriched Roots of Vigor. Chapter 1842 Enriched Roots of Vigor. The three disciples blocking Yuan's path stood with their chests high, looking quite proud of their tactics. Yuan didn't immediately respond to their threat and silently analyzed them. 1st level Spirit Warrior, 8th level Spirit Apprentice, and 7th level Spirit Apprentice, huh? All of them had a higher cultivation than Yuan, and one of them was even a Spirit Warrior. If Yuan had his original body, he wouldn't need to worry about fighting those above his cultivation. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Even if Yuan's fighting experience was far superior to the three of them combined, the three disciples could easily overpower him with raw strength alone. Moreover, Yuan lacked not just cultivation but also martial techniques and treasures. After contemplating his choices for a moment, Yuan suddenly turned around and began walking back to the point store, which left the disciples puzzled. "Wait. Where the hell do you think you're going? How dare you ignore us? Come back here." The disciples shouted for him to return, but Yuan simply ignored them. Upon returning to the store, Yuan faced the disciples and said, "You want what I have? Come get it." The disciples trembled in anger after hearing his words, but for some reason, they refused to chase after Yuan, almost as if there was an invisible barrier that prevented them from getting close to the point store. "So those who are not participants are not allowed inside the point store, huh? This is good to know." Yuan had planned on consuming the treasure inside the store, where there were others watching, making it difficult for the disciples to intervene. He never expected that only participants and those who were designed to work at the point store would be allowed to enter. Upon realizing this, Yuan immediately sat down and retrieved the enriched roots of vigor. Before consuming it, he dangled it in front of him like he was trying to bait something. "You fucking bastard. Don't you dare. I swear I'll fucking kill you later. Don't think you can stay there forever." When the three disciples saw Yuan's actions, they became infuriated, their faces flushed with redness. However, no matter how red their faces turned, their feet remained rooted to the ground, unable to take a step closer to the point store. Once Yuan confirmed that they were definitely unable to approach the point store, Yuan consumed the enriched roots of vigor and began cultivating with the disciples as spectators. The young man working behind the desk inside the store noticed Yuan's actions but didn't say anything. After a glance, he returned to his own business and pretended as if Yuan wasn't even there. Over the next several days, Yuan remained at the point store, trying to absorb the enriched roots of vigor. The 3 disciples who tried to threaten Yuan had left after spending an entire day cursing at him, throwing all sorts of insults and threats until their voices turned hoarse. A few participants had visited the store during this time, and they were curious why someone was cultivating out in the open, at the point store, no less. However, as cultivators, they all knew it was an unspoken rule to never disturb another cultivator while they were cultivating, unless they were enemies, of course. After spending 11 days cultivating at the store, Yuan finally finished absorbing the enriched roots of vigor, and his cultivation reached the 8th level of Spirit Apprentice. Although his cultivation only increased by 2 levels, Yuan could tell that his strength and combat prowess had doubled, even tripled. I should have no issue dealing with those 3 now, even if they come at me together, Yuan thought to himself as he left the store and returned home. Once he returned home, Yuan retrieved the monster cores had collected and began absorbing them as well. After consuming the enriched roots of vigor, his cultivation speed increased even more. Now, instead of taking 2 weeks to fully absorb a monster core, he only needed a week. However, he had 28 monster cores, which meant he would need 28 weeks or 7 months to finish them. 7 months is too long. Let's just increase my cultivation by 1 more level and sell the rest for points. I'll be able to hunt spirit warrior magical beasts by then, anyway. With that in mind, Yuan spent another month and a half in seclusion, increasing his cultivation to the 9th level of Spirit Apprentice. Although spending almost 2 months to increase a single level at the Spirit Apprentice realm may seem very long at a glance, especially considering Yuan's normal speed, one must keep in mind that most cultivators lack resources and have to cultivate without treasures. Even talented cultivators require months of hard work to increase a single level without the help of cultivation resources such as spirit stones and monster cores, much less treasures like the enriched roots of vigor. As for the other participants who have arrived at the Immortal Monastery, the majority of them have only recently entered the 2nd level of Spirit Apprentice, so Yuan's progress could still be considered unfathomably fast when compared to his peers. Once he ended his seclusion, Yuan went back to the point store to sell the remaining of his monster cores for points. I can give you 31,500 points for these 24 monster cores, the young man offered. I'll sell it, Yuan nodded. Great. After selling his monster cores, Yuan looked at the talent-boosting treasures again. I need 750,000 points for the next one, huh? They're getting expensive very quickly. After seeing the ridiculous price for the next treasure, Yuan decided to hold off on purchasing it for the time being. Instead, he began looking for something more affordable and would offer immediate benefits to his cultivation or abilities. Eventually, he came across a certain pill, one that would immediately push his cultivation straight into the next realm. I will buy a Spirit Warrior Advancement pill, Yuan said. That will be 10,000 points, said the store clerk. Chapter 1843 Spirit Warrior Advancement Pill. Chapter 1843 Spirit Warrior Advancement Pill. Spirit Warrior Advancement Pill. Just as its name implies, it could help a Spirit Apprentice cultivator reach Spirit Warrior instantly when consumed. However, there are a number of limitations. One such limitation was that the pill would only be effective for those at the 9th level of Spirit Apprentice. The second limitation was that a single individual could only consume 3 such pills in their lifetime, regardless of the results. Before I sell it to you, I must warn you that the Spirit Warrior Advancement Pill doesn't guarantee you'll successfully enter Spirit Warrior. These pills have a 70% chance of success, so there is a 30% chance it will do nothing, the young store clerk warned him. I understand. I still wish to buy one, Yuan nodded, purchasing a Spirit Warrior Advancement Pill for 10,000 points. Yuan returned home and immediately began preparing to attempt a breakthrough to Spirit Warrior. After consuming the pill, he felt a surge of energy coursing through him, his cultivation speed accelerating rapidly toward the next level. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the breakthrough was within reach. However, just as the energy reached its peak, it suddenly dispersed, slipping through his grasp like sand in the wind. The Spirit Warrior Advancement Pill had failed despite having a 70% success rate. Upon failing to break through using the Spirit Warrior Advancement Pill, Yuan wasted no time returning to the point store for another one. However, after consuming it and trying again, Yuan failed to break through to Spirit Warrior for a second time, failing a 70% chance success rate 2 times in a row. My luck seems to be backward here. Yuan sighed as he made his way back to the point store for the 3rd time. After purchasing a 3rd Spirit Warrior advancement pill, Yuan returned home to try to break through for his final time. After all, a single person could only consume 3 such pills in their lifetime. Eventually, a powerful burst of energy radiated from Yuan's body, signaling his successful breakthrough to the 1st level of Spirit Warrior. As the energy stabilized within him, Yuan released a sigh of relief. Without the pill, achieving the same result would have taken him 2 to 3 months of consistent effort through normal cultivation. Although it took 30,000 points and 3 tries, I have managed to enter Spirit Warrior. Now that he was a Spirit Warrior, Yuan could confidently traverse deeper into the hunting grounds, where much more powerful magical beasts roamed. However, before returning to the hunting grounds to farm more points, Yuan had to prepare. Now that I am a Spirit Warrior, I should try learning the Immortal Monastery's martial techniques. Although the participants were prohibited from using martial techniques that did not originate from the Immortal Monastery, they had no problem learning the Sect's martial techniques. The only issue was that it was nearly impossible for the participants to acquire these techniques in their current state. Yuan and the participants confirmed that they were able to purchase the Immortal Monastery's techniques with points after arriving at the Immortal Monastery. However, even the basic ones required tens of thousands of points, which was simply not feasible for the majority of the participants. As for Yuan, he didn't need to spend any points on purchasing these techniques because he already had memorized several of them. The only reason he hasn't tried to use them was due to a lack of cultivation. Now that he reached Spirit Warrior, he could start using them properly. Yuan made his way to the training grounds, a spacious outdoor area specifically used by disciples for training martial techniques. When Yuan arrived, there were dozens of disciples already training. At a glance, he observed a diverse array of techniques being practiced, some focused on swordsmanship, others on hand-to-hand combat or even niche weapons like sickles and fans. The variety of methods on display made it seem that the Immortal Monastery didn't adhere to a single teaching style like most sections. Instead, it seemed to encourage disciples to cultivate and hone techniques that suited their individual strengths and preferences, fostering a more versatile and adaptive environment. However, Yuan knew the truth behind this apparent freedom. While it was true that the Immortal Monastery didn't enforce a specific style, this wasn't due to a philosophy of allowing disciples to choose their paths freely. Instead, it was because of the Sect's unique cultivation techniques, which were designed to enhance and complement all styles equally. This adaptability was the Sect's greatest strength. It didn't matter what techniques or fighting styles the disciples practiced. The Immortal Monastery's methods ensured that every approach could reach its full potential, creating a foundation that benefited all who trained within its walls. The Immortal Monastery was renowned for one defining feature: its technique-amplifying techniques. If one observed the training grounds closely, they would notice a faint red and black aura emanating from every disciple's weapon. This distinct aura was the result of the Sect's core cultivation method, the Peerless Immortal Technique, a mythical technique unique to the Immortal Monastery. This technique was the cornerstone of the Sect's reputation, enhancing the effectiveness of any technique. It allowed disciples to push all of their abilities to unimaginable levels, making even the most basic techniques formidable in combat. The Peerless Immortal Technique. While it has an impressive name, it's a relatively simple technique that basically amplifies the strength of all techniques. What truly differentiates the Peerless Immortal Technique from other strengthening techniques is its diversity and its seemingly endless potential. Yuan recalled Tian Yang's knowledge of the technique. Typically, when a cultivator masters a specific weapon or technique, learning another would require them to start from scratch. However, the Peerless Immortal Technique completely bypassed this limitation. With this unique technique, a cultivator could effortlessly switch weapons or techniques without any loss of strength, allowing one to display prowess that would only be possible when the technique is fully mastered, even with the most basic understanding. That said, the technique is not perfect and has its own drawbacks. The Peerless Immortal Technique was incredibly difficult to learn and even harder to master. In fact, most disciples spend their entire lives stuck at the basic levels of the technique, unable to advance further. Chapter 1844 Peerless Immortal Technique. Chapter 1844 Peerless Immortal Technique. The Peerless Immortal Technique was comprised of 9 known levels, with the first 2 levels considered the foundational basics. Although most disciples only ever managed to reach level 2, even at this stage, they were able to display a level of prowess that far surpassed that of other cultivators with the same cultivation level. This is why, despite the difficulty, the Immortal Monastery remained a top sect during the primordial era. Yuan retrieved one of his swords from his spatial ring and made his way to an empty spot in the training grounds. With plenty of space around him, he could practice without worrying about disturbing the others. While the Peerless Immortal Technique is the Immortal Monastery's main technique, they also have other techniques that, while not as versatile, are still incredibly powerful, Yuan thought to himself, considering his options. The Peerless Immortal Technique was designed to amplify and enhance other techniques, meaning it required a foundational technique to pair with. Without one, practicing it would be meaningless. Yuan closed his eyes and focused, delving deep into Tian Yang's memories to recall the techniques he had once practiced. Once the memories surfaced, Yuan began training. The first technique was called 1,000-Mile Sword Strike, a straightforward yet powerful sword art. With a precise swing of the sword, it unleashed a sharp arc of spiritual energy, cutting through the air and striking targets from a distance. Standing on the training grounds, Yuan raised his sword, channeling his spiritual energy as he practiced the technique. He swung the blade, and a faint arc of energy shot forward, dissipating shortly after. It wasn't perfect, but with each repetition, his movements grew sharper, and the spiritual energy more concentrated. Several hours later, once Yuan was satisfied with the speed and distance, he began training the Peerless Immortal Technique. Once activated, Yuan's sword became engulfed in an ominous red and black aura. The next time he used the 1,000-Mile Sword Strike, it flew 2 times faster and further than before while only using about 50% more spiritual energy than he usually would. With my cultivation, they'll only be able to use the Peerless Immortal Technique up to the first level, but this is already powerful enough. Yuan continued training until he was satisfied. As Yuan concluded his training session and prepared to leave, he caught sight of 3 individuals approaching him from a distance. Their hurried pace and the unmistakable killing intent in their gazes left no doubt about their hostile intentions. These 3 disciples were the same ones who tried to rob his enriched roots of vigor. Despite having plenty of time to run away, Yuan remained still, patiently waiting for them to reach him. The 3 disciples thought he was frozen from fear, causing smiles to appear on their faces. "Did you really think we'd forget about what happened last time, you bamboo bastard?" the spirit warrior snarled, his voice dripping with anger. His face turned red, both from the effort of suppressing his rage and the humiliation that resurfaced as he recalled their previous encounter. "Of course not. In fact, I was hoping you'd return," Yuan said. He faced them with a calm expression and continued, "So, what are you going to do about it?" "How dare," the spirit warrior's voice halted as he noticed Yuan's cultivation. "Why you? How are you already a spirit warrior? You were only at the 6th level of spirit apprentice the last time we spoke." In the time it had taken Yuan to advance from the 6th level of spirit apprentice to spirit warrior, none of the 3 disciples had made any progress in their cultivation. This realization didn't just shock the 3 disciples, it terrified them. The speed of Yuan's advancement was far beyond anything they had seen or heard of before, and the thought that they might have offended a genius sent chills down their spines. Their anger and confidence began to waver, replaced by a creeping sense of dread as they considered the possibility of offending someone they shouldn't have. Noticing the fear in their eyes, Yuan smiled and said, "Is there something weird about me being a spirit warrior?" He raised his sword and activated the Peerless Immortal Technique before pressing its blade against the spirit warrior's neck. "I want to kill the 3 of you right now, but I am a rule-abiding disciple. However, if I see any of you outside the sect, especially the hunting grounds, I won't give any warnings and swing my sword." The disciples trembled in fear. However, it was not Yuan's threat that terrified them, it was his usage of the Peerless Immortal Technique. Despite being at the sect for over half a decade, neither of them had managed to reach the first level of the technique. Yet, despite having just become a spirit warrior, Yuan was already demonstrating a mastery of the technique that seemed superior to even that of inner court disciples. I will give you 5 seconds to get out of my sight before I start swinging my sword. Why you wouldn't dare to kill another disciple in the sect? This is the training grounds. Accidents happen here every once in a while. I can just say that I was too absorbed in my training to notice you and accidentally killed you, Yuan shrugged. The moment the disciples sensed the cold, suffocating wave of killing intent emanating from Yuan, their courage evaporated in an instant. Without a second thought, they turned and bolted, fleeing as fast as their legs could carry them. Once those 3 disciples left, Yuan made his way to the hunting grounds. At the hunting grounds, Yuan ignored the weaker magical beasts and went straight to the area with powerful magical beasts at the spirit warrior level. Magical beasts are inherently stronger than human cultivators at the same level, so it was common to see disciples work together to hunt a single magical beast. However, Yuan traversed the place alone, killing magical beasts left and right with the 1,000 miles sword strike and Peerless Immortal technique, quickly filling his spatial ring with materials. Chapter 1845 A Rumor. Chapter 1845 A Rumor, Senior Sister's Son, have you heard? There's a monster hunting all of the magical beasts in the hunting grounds. A female sect elder approached Elder's son while she was patrolling the outer areas of the hunting grounds. Huh? Monster? What are you talking about? Elder's son raised an eyebrow at this news. There's a rumor going around saying that an outer court disciple is hunting spirit warrior magical beasts alone and at an incredible rate. I don't know how credible this information is, but according to the sect elder who witnessed it, this outer court disciple could utilize the Peerless Immortal technique even better than many inner court disciples. An outer court disciple doing better than inner court disciples with the Peerless Immortal technique? When did our sect acquire such a genius? Elder's son asked with raised eyebrows. Who knows? We don't even know if this person really exists. Why don't you go take a look and confirm it yourself? Elder's son asked. That's what I plan on doing. Want to come with me? I would love to, but I don't want to give the sect leader any reasons to lecture me, Elder's son sighed out loud. Oh, right. You were lectured for paying too much attention to a certain disciple a few years ago. What happened to him? He's on his way to becoming a core disciple. He left the sect some time ago to train. A core disciple? I guess there's a reason you were paying so much attention to him. Everyone thought you had fallen for a disciple back then. Do you have any idea how shocked we were? That's absolute nonsense. He's akin to a little brother to me, one who is always in trouble and requires my help. He would have died long ago if it weren't for me, Elder's son shook her head. Although her words may sound a little egotistical, it was very true. Tian Yang would have died long ago if it weren't for her constant support, not to mention the amount of time she had to save him in the hunting grounds. Whatever you say, senior sister. Anyway, I'll go check out this monster and report back to you once I confirm or expose the rumors. With that, the female sect elder left Elder's son and went deeper into the hunting grounds. At the same time, Yuan was just leaving the hunting grounds after filling his spatial ring with materials. A single magical beast earned him around 100 points before, but now, they were earning him around 500 points. As for the monster cores, they would also earn him 5 times more than previously if he sold them. Of course, he only sold the materials and kept the monster cores. However, while the magical beasts earned him more points, they were harder to encounter. In the end, it took Yuan almost a week to fill his spatial ring when it used to only take 3 to 4 days. Still, the amount of points he was earning was still much more than before. In a week, Head earned around 55,000 points. At this rate, I'll need to farm magical beasts for 3 months straight before I can afford the next treasure. Although it was a long time, Yuan didn't mind it, as it was almost a drop in the bucket when compared to Tian Yang, who had spent years training inside the hunting grounds. I'd like to purchase an earth-grade sword, Yuan said to the young store clerk. That would cost 5,000 points. It was 1,000 times more expensive than the spirit-grade sword Yuan had purchased. "I'll take it," Yuan said. Although Yuan wouldn't have minded continuing to use his spirit-grade swords, they were beginning to show visible signs of wear and tear. The immense stress placed on them by the Peerless Immortal technique had pushed them to their limits, and cracks were starting to form. It was clear they wouldn't last much longer under such strain. After acquiring the Earth-grade sword, Yuan returned to the hunting grounds to continue his grind. "Oh. Is that him?" The Sect elder who went to confirm the rumors finally found Yuan after searching for an entire day. She then watched as Yuan killed a magical beast from afar using the 1,000 sword strike, which had been strengthened by the Peerless Immortal technique. Heavens! He killed it with a single strike. And his Peerless Immortal technique is almost level 2. Only the top inner court disciples have reached that level after decades of hard work. The Sect elder almost couldn't believe her eyes. After watching Yuan for a few hours, the Sect elder approached him and asked, "Disciple, what is your name?" "My name is Xiao Yang," Yuan introduced himself. "Xiao Yang, huh? How long have you been a disciple?" "A few months." "Only a few months? And you're already a spirit warrior? Not to mention your understanding of the Peerless Immortal technique. Did you, by any chance, come from the Immortal clans?" "No, I have no relations to the Immortal clans." Yuan's eyebrows twitched after hearing about the Immortal clans. "Then do you have a master?" Although only inner court disciples are allowed to have a master, exceptionally talented individuals are exempted from this rule. "No, I don't have a master," Yuan shook his head. A disciple may accept a Sect elder as master once they are promoted to the inner court. This had several benefits, such as learning techniques that most disciples do not have access to, as well as receiving much more cultivation resources than others. "No, I don't have a master, nor do I have any intentions of accepting one." Yuan shook his head. "Why not? You'd grow stronger much faster if you had one. You would also receive special protection from the Sect." The Sect elder was puzzled, even surprised by Yuan's response, as most disciples would kill for a master. "I don't know," Yuan shrugged. "How about I be your master? You use the sword, right?" "Well, I happen to be a sword master," the Sect elder revealed with a puffed chest. My little brother creator's thought. Chapter 1846 Soul Refining Elixir. Chapter 1846 Soul Refining Elixir. "Sorry, Senior, but if I had a master, I would prefer it be someone I am familiar with." Yuan shook his head. "That's a simple fix. We can just get to know each other better." The Sect elder appeared noticeably eager, even a little desperate, to recruit Yuan as her disciple. This was because having a highly talented disciple would significantly enhance her reputation and status within the Sect. A disciple's achievements reflected directly on their master, and if Yuan were to accomplish something extraordinary for the Sect, it could lead to promotions and increased prestige for the elder. For her, recruiting someone with Yuan's potential was not just about guidance, it was an opportunity to elevate her own standing. "Thank you for the offer, Senior, but for personal reasons, I won't be accepting a master for now," Yuan refused. The Sect elder sighed, clearly disappointed in his response. However, she wasn't ready to give up a talented disciple like him and said, "I am Elder Jing. My offer remains, so if you ever change your mind in the future, you can find me." "Thank you, Senior. I will definitely keep your offer in mind," Yuan responded politely. Despite saying that, Yuan had no intentions of accepting her as his master. In fact, he already had someone else in mind. Elder Jing left shortly after and returned to Elder Sun's side to report her findings. The rumors were true. This outer court disciple exists. I watched him slay spirit warrior magical beasts as if they were just ordinary animals. I have never seen anyone like him before. Not only that, he's also very talented with the sword. His movements were swift and precise with zero waste. Hell, he might even be better than me in terms of basic sword understanding. Elder Jing praised Yuan endlessly, leaving Elder Sun speechless. Such a talented disciple, I wonder if he's already accepted a master. He doesn't have a master yet. Honestly, I tried to recruit him, but he refused, Elder Jing sighed. Did he say why? He only said it was due to some personal reasons. I see. Speaking of accepting a disciple, I'm surprised you didn't try to recruit that brother-like disciple of yours, Elder Jing suddenly said. It's complicated, Elder Sun shook her head, refusing to elaborate further. Time continued to flow, and before Yuan realized it, a whole month had passed since his breakthrough to Spirit Warrior. He decided to take a break from the hunting grounds to check up on the others. Ji Ran had just achieved the 5th level of Spirit Apprentice, while Lan Yingying was on the verge of entering the 3rd level. Have you seen Mei Li, Yingzi, or the Zither Goddess? Yuan asked Ji Ran and Lan Yingying. They both shook their heads. Since they're beasts like me, they might be a little slower, especially Yingzi, who only started cultivating recently, Lan Yingying said. The Zither Goddess should be arriving soon, through. I wouldn't be too worried about them. Not even half of the 20,000 participants have made it to the Immortal Monastery, Ji Ran added. Hopefully, they're just a little slow and nothing happened to them, Yuan said. By the way, young master, do you think the founder is also in this place? Ji Ran suddenly asked. It's his trial, so it's highly likely. Whether he'll contact us or not is a different story. I hope he does. I would like to speak more with him, Ji Ran said. After his break ended, Yuan returned to his grind inside the hunting grounds. Before he left, he gave Ji Ran and Lan Yingying a few monster cores had collected throughout the month. As time passed, Yuan's name continued to speak throughout the sect as a beast-slaying genius. Several sect elders besides Elder Jing approached him in hopes of recruiting him as their disciple, but Yuan refused all of them. Some were more persistent than others, and there was even one that subtly threatened him. In the case of being threatened, Yuan merely acted like he didn't understand he was being threatened, which worked. In the blink of an eye, another 2 months passed, and Yuan finally collected enough points to purchase the next tier of treasure. At the point store, Yuan spent 750,000 points purchasing the soul refining elixir, a powerful treasure that increased one's soul strength and overall cultivation talents. After acquiring the treasure, Yuan immediately returned home to consume it, which took an entire day. Upon consuming the treasure, Yuan's cultivation soared to the 3rd level of Spirit Warrior, and he could now fully absorb a monster core in a little under 2 days. However, even after spending another 2 months absorbing all of the monster cores had collected, his cultivation only reached the 5th level of Spirit Warrior. It has been around a year since Yuan and the others began the trial. Yet, only a little over 10,000 participants have made it to the Immortal Monastery. While Yuan was in seclusion trying to absorb the monster cores, both Tan Songyun and Shi Mei Li made it to the Immortal Monastery. Where's your master? Tan Songyun asked Lan Yingying when she arrived. He's in seclusion. How far has he progressed? He was at the 1st level of Spirit Warrior right before entering seclusion. He's already reached Spirit Warrior? How's that possible? Tan Songyun exclaimed in a shocked voice. You will have to ask him. Lan Yingying shook her head. Shi Mei Li showed up at the Immortal Monastery a month after Tan Songyun. How long have you been here? Shi Mei Li asked. About half a year. That long? How? It was mostly with the young master's help. Yua, Xiaoyang. Where is he right now? Cultivating inside his room. He lives next door, by the way. After learning about Yuan's living quarters, both Shi Mei Li and Tan Songyun decided to live nearby. By the way, I heard a massacre had occurred in your group. Was that? Shi Mei Li asked. Yes, this is what happened. Lan Yingying explained the situation, leaving her speechless. Chapter 1847 Sudden Event. Chapter 1847 Sudden Event. When Yuan emerged from his seclusion, he was pleasantly surprised to learn that Shi Mei Li and Tan Songyun had finally arrived at the Immortal Monastery. So the only one left is Yingzi, huh? If Yuan had to be honest, he was the most worried about Yingzi, as she was new to cultivation in the 9 heavens. Moreover, she isn't even familiar with humans, much less their lifestyles. Yuan could imagine Ingzi having a hard time adapting to the quotas in the bamboo garden. I must ask, how many points do you currently have? She merely asked Yuan as they sat in his room. Near 0 since I just spent all of them, Yuan said. However, I had 750,000 points before that. 750,000? Everyone in the room exclaimed in shock. The rest of the participants had just begun entering the hunting grounds to farm for points, yet Yuan had already earned and spent 750,000 in one go. It was an astronomical amount of points that they couldn't even begin to comprehend. How in heaven's name did you earn that many points? Did you threaten someone for them? Tan Songyun asked with wide eyes. You can get points by selling materials of magical beasts to the point store. You get about 100 per kill as Spirit Apprentice. Once you reach Spirit Warrior, you can expect around 500 per kill, Yuan explained his methods. However, even if everyone knew his method, not everyone could replicate it. After all, most participants have to pair up to fight a single magical beast, and they'd need to split the points. Yuan was fighting alone, so he could easily keep all points for himself. By the way, Harris a little something. Yuan retrieved 4 golden spirit pills from his spatial ring and continued, these will make your life a little easier. What is that? She merely asked. That's the golden spirit pill. Although not by much, it can boost one's cultivation talents, Ren explained. Oh, I saw that in the list. They cost 7,500 points each, right? Are you sure you want to spend so many points on us? I don't want to slow down your progress, she merely said. Yuan smiled and said, it's only 7,500 points. I can earn that much with a single monster core and some materials. It'll hardly slow down my progress right now. Ren then said, I appreciate the offer, young master, but I have already purchased and consumed the golden spirit pill myself. You can save mine for Ingzi. In the Immortal Monastery, Ren's progress was only second to Yuan, which was expected, as he was once the sect leader of the Immortal Monastery. Shi Meili and Lan Yingying accepted the golden spirit pill. As for Tan Songyun, she hesitated to receive Yuan's assistance out of pride. However, she eventually accepted the golden spirit pill. Thank you. She mumbled. Sometime later, just as everyone prepared to leave Yuan's place, they heard a familiar voice being broadcast through voice transmission, allowing all of the participants to hear it no matter where they were. The Immortal Monastery will be hosting its entry-level Immortal Exchange in half a year. Only Outer Court disciples and those below Spirit Master may participate. The winner of this tournament will be granted 1 million points and the treasure Translucent Dew of Flawlessness. However, you will need 25,000 points to participate in the tournament. You are only allowed to use your own points to participate. Moreover, you will gain 1 contribution for every victory. Once the announcement ended, Ren said, that was the founder's voice. Entry-level Immortal Exchange, huh? Will you be participating, Yuan? She merely turned to look at him, who calmly nodded. There was no way Head missed the chance to acquire the Translucent Dew of Flawlessness, which would help him achieve an untainted body and speed his cultivation speed tremendously. I guess that means I won't be participating, she merely shrugged. We're too far behind, after all, Ren sighed. I'll also skip it, Lan Yingying nodded in agreement. Tan Songyun didn't say anything, but she also planned on skipping the tournament. As enticing as the rewards were, she knew she wouldn't defeat Yuan, who was an entire realm ahead of her. If she joined the tournament, she'd only be wasting 25,000 points. I guess this will be an easy win for you, she merely then said. Yuan shook his head and said, that's not necessarily true. If only those like us are allowed to participate, then I will most likely win it without any competition. However, they didn't say anything about only allowing us to participate, so it's safe to assume the other disciples will also be participating. The young master is right. The founder wouldn't give such a generous reward so easily, Ren said. By the way, even if you know you won't win the tournament, I think you should still participate for the contribution, which you will need to become an inner court disciple, Yuan then said. But 25,000 points is a lot. Shi Meili sighed. There are many ways to earn points, but contribution is a different story. We might only be able to acquire contributions through events such as this one. In such a case, we'd want to participate in all of them, regardless if we win or lose. Yuan's logical take on the situation instantly made everyone in the room reconsider their decision. Although 25,000 points may be a lot, they could earn it back with enough effort. However, contribution was a different story. If they could not become an inner court disciple due to lack of contribution, even 1 billion points would be pointless. Alright, I'll participate in the event and earn as much contribution as possible, Shi Meili said after pondering for a moment. Lan Yingying and Ji Ran nodded their heads in agreement. Sometime later, everyone left Yuan's living quarters to continue their training. As for Yuan, he returned to the hunting grounds to continue slaying magical beasts for points. Chapter 1848 Half a year. Chapter 1848 Half a year after returning to the hunting grounds, Yuan wasted no time grinding magical beasts. After the soul-refining elixir, the prices of talent-boosting treasures in the point store no longer experienced extreme price hikes. However, they were still far from affordable, with most of them priced between 1 million and 5 million points. The translucent dew of flawlessness was a treasure that cost 7 million points, but Yuan was pretty confident he'd be able to win the tournament. With 6 months before the tournament, I only have enough time to purchase 2, maybe 3 treasures if I sell all of my monster cores. Before going to the hunting grounds, Yuan stocked up on recovery and hunger pills, which would allow him to get rid of hunger entirely. Each pill could make an adult feel full for an entire week without any issues, and some could even last a month, even a year. Knowing that there was only half a year until the tournament, Yuan did not want to waste any time outside the hunting grounds. Hell, he even purchased several more spatial rings to reduce the number of trips he'd need to take to the point store to sell his materials. As Yuan hunted magical beasts day and night, he improved his understanding of the Peerless Immortal technique. In the blink of an eye, an entire month has passed since Yuan entered the hunting grounds, and for the first time since he entered, he had to leave to empty out his spatial rings. At the point store, Yuan placed a dozen spatial rings on the table before the young clerk, causing him to raise an eyebrow. "I'd like to sell everything for points," Yuan said. "Please give me a moment to confirm the contents." The young clerk accepted the spatial rings and inspected their contents. A few minutes later, he said, "I can give you 320,000 points for the materials and 90,000 points for the monster cores." Deal. After selling the materials, Yuan purchased some more recovery pills before heading right back to the hunting grounds. Due to the upcoming tournament, Yuan noticed a lot more people were at the hunting grounds when he entered it. However, the majority of them were in the outer areas, and as Yuan entered deeper into the hunting grounds, he stopped encountering participants and would only encounter real disciples. For the second month, Yuan earned a total of 450,000 points, bringing his total to 860,000 points. In the third month, Yuan earned exactly 500,000 points, bringing his total to 1,360,000 points. After collecting over 1 million points, Yuan stopped farming magical beasts to purchase a treasure and consume it. After carefully considering all his options, Yuan decided to purchase the refined dragon blood pill, an exceedingly powerful pill infused with the blood of a true dragon. This pill granted the consumer immense physical strength and significantly enhanced resilience, bestowing them with a body akin to that of a dragon. Although the pill had cost him 1,250,000 points, Yuan did not regret it, especially after consuming it and immediately feeling several times more powerful than before. "In my current condition, I should have no problem hunting even magical beasts at the Spirit Master realm," Yuan thought to himself. His cultivation also increased by a single level, bringing him to the 6th level of Spirit Warrior. However, even without factoring in his techniques, his raw strength alone had already reached the level of a 1st-level Spirit Master. This breakthrough also allowed Yuan to push the Peerless Immortal technique to the beginning of its 2nd level. When used, it could amplify the prowess of its targeted technique by 5 times. Once he was prepared, Yuan returned to the hunting grounds. Once he arrived, he went right past the outer area and even the inner regions, only stopping when he reached the deepest parts of the hunting grounds, where magical beasts at the Spirit Master realm roamed. The core region of the hunting grounds was so dangerous that most outer court disciples avoided it, and only inner court disciples would dare to traverse this land. However, in Yuan's eyes, these magical beasts were no different than the ones roaming around the inner region, as he'd still kill most of them with a single strike. The only issue was that he needed to use the majority of his spiritual energy to take down a single magical beast, so after every kill, he'd need to consume a spirit recovery pill. A month later, he returned to the point store to unload his materials. Each magical beast now earned him around 1,000 to 2,000 points. Although the price of materials didn't increase too much, the monster cores were an entirely different story. A single monster core could earn him anywhere from 10,000 points to 50,000 points, depending on the rarity and quality of the monster core. In the end, Yuan earned a grand total of 1,750,000 points. This allowed him to purchase another treasure, and he purchased the Phoenix Rising Pill, a potent treasure that increased his recovery rate, resistance to fire, and Danshan's capacity. It also cost him 1,500,000 points. After spending 3 days absorbing the treasure, Yuan's cultivation reached the 7th level of Spirit Warrior. He then wasted no time returning to the hunting grounds and immediately began grinding again. In the 5th month, Yuan earned an impressive 2 million points. However, he didn't purchase another treasure and decided to save it for a specific treasure he had his eyes on. For the last month, Yuan had a little less than a month, and had killed so many magical beasts in the previous months that the core region of the hunting grounds had become void of life. The magical beasts were simply being slain faster than they could regenerate, so Yuan was only able to earn a total of 1,300,000 points. Fortunately, he had just enough to purchase the treasure he wanted. Chapter 1849 Fate-Altering Pill. Chapter 1849 Fate-Altering Pill. With just a week left before the tournament began, Yuan sold all of his collected materials and monster cores to the point store. Using the wealth of points he had accumulated, he purchased the Fate-Altering Pill, a priceless treasure from the primordial era known for its unparalleled ability to completely transform an individual's innate talent and constitution for the better. This would not only improve Yuan's talents all around but even have a chance to grant him a unique physique, something his current body did not possess. Although this treasure had cost him an insane 4 million points, Yuan did not hesitate to spend the points. Once he acquired the treasure, Yuan returned home and instantly consumed the fate-altering pill, spending the next several days in seclusion. Meanwhile, the other participants used the last few days to sign up for the tournament. The majority of them were between the 4th level and 6th level Spirit Apprentice, and 25,000 points were enough to bankrupt most of them. Since only Yuan's group was aware of his true progress, the other participants remained confident in their own chances of winning the tournament. As a result, the atmosphere was lively, and spirits were high. Where's Yuan? Is he still in seclusion? The enrollment period for the tournament ends tomorrow. If he doesn't sign up by then, he won't be able to participate, she merely asked. I saw him rushing back to his house a few days ago. I didn't even get the chance to call for him, Lan Yingying said. I'll go disturb him if he doesn't come out by today, Ji Ran said. The three of them were seated outside Lan Yingying's living quarters. After training for half a year with barely any breaks, the three of them were worn out and needed to take the last few days to relax before the tournament began, hence why they were sipping tea and relaxing together. What about Yingzi? Has she arrived at the Immortal Monastery yet? Most of the participants have arrived at the sect by now, she merely wondered out loud. Seeing how long it's taking her to arrive is certainly concerning, but there's nothing we can do but hope for the best, Lan Yingying sighed. A few hours later, Ji Ran and the others noticed Yuan's front door opening. The person himself walked out the next moment. Young master, you're finally out. I was just about to knock on your door, Ji Ran said with a relieved smile. Yuan smiled and asked, what's the hurry? The enrollment period of the tournament ends tomorrow, or tonight. If you don't sign up by then, you won't be able to participate in the tournament. I know, but I still have time, don't I? Anyway, I'll be back. After registering for the tournament, Yuan returned to his living quarters to spend his time with the others. Ingzi hasn't arrived yet, huh? Yuan sighed out loud. I can't tell you not to worry since I am also a little concerned. However, there are still over 2 entire years for her to arrive at the Sect, she merely said. Everyone was given 4 years to get out of the bamboo garden, and only a year and a few months have passed since the trials began, so there was still plenty of time for the participants to arrive at the Immortal Monastery. There's no point worrying about it since we can't do anything about it but hope for the best, Yuan said. Anyway, how did you guys spend the last half a year? Yuan asked them. He noticed that Lan Yingying was at the 9th level of Spirit Apprentice while she Mei was at the 7th level. Ji Ran had already become a Spirit Warrior, even reaching the 2nd level. We spent half of that time cultivating the monster cores you gave us and the other half inside the hunting grounds for points. Since we're a 3-man group, we needed to collect 75,000 points, Lan Yingying said. 3-man? You hunted with them? Yuan looked at Ji Ran with raised eyebrows. He was sure that Ji Ran was going to do things alone. It's not me, Ji Ran shook his head. We went hunting with Sister Songyun, said she Mei. Sister? Since when have you gotten so close? Yuan's eyes widened with surprise. He also anticipated Tan Songyun would be hunting with her fellow faction members, but that didn't seem to be the case. Where is she right now? Yuan then asked. Cultivating inside her room. I see. By the way, did the 2 of you study the technique I recommended to you before? Yuan asked a moment later. The Peerless Immortal technique? Yes, we went to the library to acquire the technique right afterward. However, it's a very difficult technique. I am barely scratching the surface, even after having it for half a year. That said, I only spend a little time studying it every day. I'll spend more time on it after the tournament, she Mei said. Every disciple of the Immortal Monastery is granted the privilege of learning the Peerless Immortal technique for free, so Lan Yingying and she Mei were able to acquire it without any issues or spending points. Moreover, unlike the cultivation technique, they were unable to spend points speeding up their memorization progress. Fortunately, the founder did not alter the Peerless Immortal technique in any way, allowing everyone to study it without any artificial difficulty. However, even without altering its difficulty, the Peerless Immortal technique would still challenge the geniuses and experienced cultivators doing the trial. That said, since there were no guidelines or instructions that recommended the participants to learn the technique, it was unknown how many participants actually picked up the Peerless Immortal technique to study. It's a difficult technique, but it'll be worth it. Trust me, Yuan said. He then looked at Ji Ran and asked, just wondering, but what level of the technique did you reach? Ji Ran quickly said, I reached the 6th level before being imprisoned in the Shadow Realm. It hasn't advanced since then for obvious reasons. Chapter 1850 Entry, Level Immortal Tournament. Chapter 1850 Entry-Level Immortal Tournament, 6th level, huh? That's not bad, considering there are only 9 levels to the technique, Yuan muttered after hearing Ji Ran's response. Not bad? Ji Ran raised his eyebrows and said, Young master, although there are 9 levels, only the founder has ever managed to reach that level. The highest level achieved by someone other than the founder is only the 7th level, which was achieved by the sect leader before I took his position. What about you, young master? What level did you achieve in your past life? Yuan shrugged and calmly replied, I have no clue. I only have memories of learning up to the 3rd level. I don't have all of my memories of that incarnation. The 3rd level, huh? Only the top inner court disciple would reach that level when I was still the sect leader, Ji Ran mumbled. That is also the requirement to qualify as a core disciple. Anyway, I'm going to get some sleep. It's been a while. I'll see you all tomorrow at the tournament, Yuan said to them before returning home and instantly falling asleep the moment he lay on the bed. The following day, Yuan and the other participants made their way to the only arena available in the outer court. However, when they arrived, they noticed that the real disciples were also there. This made them wonder if these disciples were just there to spectate or to participate in the tournament as well. Do you think they'll be participating as well? I hope not. Because if they are, we're all screwed. Right? There's no way we could compete with them with our trash bodies and talents. The participants mumbled amongst themselves as they entered the arena and sat down in the empty seats. Although the arena was massive, with tens of thousands of seats available, it quickly filled up with disciples. There was also a small but luxurious section for sect elders and disciples from the inner court. Once the seats were filled, a tall and handsome figure descended from the sky, landing directly on the stage in the center of the arena. When the sect elders and the real disciples saw this figure, they immediately stood up and lowered their heads before greeting in unison, "We greet the sect leader." Ren was also standing, but it was not because he recognized the handsome man's face. Instead, he recognized the handsome man's robes, something he also wore before. Realizing that they were before the sect leader of the Immortal Monastery, the participants also hastily stood up and silently bowed. At the same time, they wondered if this sect leader was the founder, the same individual who spoke to them before the Immortal Monastery's opening. I will keep things brief. The rules are as follows. Once the sect leader spoke, the participants no longer doubted his identity, as he sounded exactly like the voice from the Immortal Gates. First and foremost, killing is not allowed. Even if it's an accident, you will be forced to forfeit the match if you kill your opponent. If it was deemed that you'd purposefully killed your opponent, you will also be punished. For each match you win, you will be rewarded 1 contribution. There are 8,192 participants, so the maximum contribution you can earn through matches is 13. However, if you win the tournament, you'll also be awarded an additional 10 points. If you didn't know already, one must have at least 25 contributions to even qualify for the Inner Court Disciple examination. Although 25 contributions may seem like a lot at a glance since one would only acquire 23 points from winning a tournament, it was actually not that difficult to earn contributions in the past. For example, a disciple could finish a simple sect mission and would be awarded 2 to 3 points, so they'd only need to do about 10 missions to qualify as an Inner Court Disciple if they were also Spirit Masters. For the following rule, since I am a believer that your wealth is part of your talents, I allow you to use your own treasures in the tournament. However, this is only limited to the weapon you'll use to fight, so your sword, spear, etc. If you don't have a weapon, the sect will provide one for you. However, it will only be an ordinary weapon. Damn! If only I had purchased a weapon before they sold out. The participants, mostly those like Yuan, were dumbfounded to hear such a rule, as many of them were still using ordinary weapons. However, this wasn't because they were too cheap to purchase a spirit-grade treasure from the point store. It was because the point store had a stock limit, something the people didn't find out until someone tried purchasing something that had already sold out, such as a spirit-grade treasure. However, when questioned about the stock, the point store would not reveal the limit for each item and would only say if the item was in stock or not. Not knowing if they might miss out on something in the store caused a panic buy. The first thing the people looked at were treasures and weapons. Unfortunately for them, anything past the Golden Spirit Pill was still out of everyone's price range. As for the Golden Spirit Pill, it quickly sold out. Although the participants didn't know how many had been sold in total, they knew that 14 of them had been purchased before it ran out. Unbeknownst to them, Yuan had purchased 5 of them, and Ren had also purchased 1, meaning there were only 20 Golden Spirit Pills in stock. This amount was incredibly small, especially considering there were over 10,000 participants. Yuan wasn't aware of the stock limit, so his eyebrows raised after hearing the people around him complain about it. He turned to look at Lan Yingying and asked, "What are they talking about? What was sold out? You didn't know? The items in the point store have purchase limits, so once an item is bought out, it can no longer be purchased again," she revealed. Chapter 1851 Limited Stock. Chapter 1851 Limited Stock. What? There's a stock limit to the items in the point store? Yuan was genuinely surprised to learn about this information. All of the spirit-grade swords have been sold out for some time now. Luckily, we all managed to purchase one, Lan Yingying added. I purchased a spirit-grade spear, and they are still in stock due to low demand, Shi Meili added. Swords were the most popular and widely used weapon, so it wasn't shocking for them to run out of stock so quickly. What about treasures? Yuan then asked. Well, the golden spirit pill is sold out. The enriched roots of vigor and soul refining elixir are still available. As for the rest, nobody even bothered asking about them since they're way out of our league. I see. I should buy as many as I can before they run out of stock then. Yuan mumbled to himself. Even though the treasures would only work once for each individual, he wanted to secure the most powerful treasures for his own people. The sect leader continued speaking. Once the tournament begins, the fighters' numbers will be called. Those who have been called will be given 10 seconds to enter the stage. Failure to enter the stage on time will result in an automatic loss. When the participants signed up for the tournament, they were each given a number. Sometime later, the sect leader flew off the stage and to his personal seat, which was atop the entire arena, giving him a full view of everything and the presence of a god. Soon, a sect elder acting as the judge entered the stage and announced the beginning of the tournament. There were over 8,000 participants in the tournament, and since there would only be 2 fighters at a time, the tournament was guaranteed to take a long time. Moreover, the numbers called seemed to be random, so none of the participants dared to leave the arena, fearing they might miss their turn. Numbers 99 and 1209, the sect elder called. Not even a second later, 2 disciples jumped from the spectators' area and onto the stage. Once the fighters retrieved their weapons, the sect elder officially started the match. For the first several fights, everyone at the arena was watching with excitement, including the participants, but as time passed and more fights happened, the noises calmed down, and the participants began cultivating. Soon, there would only be loud cheers every so often when something amazing happened, or it was a popular disciple's turn to fight. As much as the participants wanted to shut down their senses and cultivate in complete silence, they didn't dare to, as it would also block them from hearing their number being called out. The people doing the trial also realized that they would not only have to fight real disciples from the Immortal Monastery, but there was also a chance they would encounter a spirit warrior as their opponent. Eventually, someone from Yuan's group was called. Number 3333 and 4099. That's me. I'll see you guys later, Shi Meili suddenly stood up and said. Good luck, Yuan, and the others said to her. Shi Meili nodded at them before jumping onto the stage. Her opponent was a young man at the 9th level of Spirit Apprentice, 2 whole levels above Shi Meili. By now, over 100 matches have occurred, and in these matches, a dozen of them were fought by those who came from the Bamboo Garden, commonly known as Bamboo Disciples by the other disciples. As for the result of these dozen matches, only a single one of them managed to win because they got lucky with their opponent. Shi Meili would be considered unlucky by the others since her opponent was of higher cultivation than her. Even though it was only 2 levels, one must consider that Shi Meili was in a mediocre body with mediocre talents. Someone without talents would have trouble overcoming an opponent a single level higher, much less 2 levels. Fortunately for the Bamboo Disciples, most of the outer court disciples were as mediocre as them, and they lacked the knowledge and experience the Bamboo Disciples had. On the stage, Shi Meili wielded her spirit-grade spear while her opponent wielded a spirit-grade sword. Begin. The sect elder wasted no time starting the fight. Shi Meili and the disciple clashed the next moment. A spear, huh? You don't see that weapon often, the disciples murmured to each other. While the spear may have existed for many thousands of years, very few people actually mastered the spear during the primordial era, and compared to sword's popularity and vast knowledge, it was almost non-existent, hence why the disciples were surprised to see Shi Meili's weapon. As for her opponent, he also wasn't familiar with the spear and thus didn't know how to deal with it. Shi Meili, on the other hand, has over 10,000 years of experience with the spear. In the blink of an eye, Shi Meili dominated her opponent before he could even display any techniques. Wow, that bamboo disciple is definitely better than the others I have seen so far. She's also very pretty. Maybe I should try courting her. The disciples no longer looked down on Shi Meili after her domineering display, with some even falling for her. After the fight ended, which didn't even last 3 minutes, she merely returned to her seat. "Great job," Yuan said. "It felt like I was bullying a child," she merely said in a somewhat embarrassed manner. While she was over 10,000 years old, the outer court disciples of the Immortal Monastery were mostly between 16 and 30 years old. "Don't think too much about it. A win is a win," Yuan said with a calm smile. Several matches later, Lan Yingying was called to the stage. "Good luck, Yingying." She merely and the others cheered for her. Upon entering her stage, Lan Yingying faced her opponent, a female disciple wielding a sword, who was also at the 9th level of Spirit Apprentice. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Chapter 1852 Immortal Monastery's 4th Sect Leader. Chapter 1852 Immortal Monastery's 4th Sect Leader Lan Yingying also wielded a sword, and once the match began, it quickly became apparent that she was not as experienced as Shi Meili when it came to wielding a weapon. Unlike Shi Meili, who had over 10,000 years to train both her body and skills with the weapon, Lan Yingying was only slightly older than Yuan in terms of his current life. Moreover, she was a divine serpent who fought with sacred fire and her own body, so she was almost a complete beginner when it came to weapons. Fortunately, she was able to get used to holding and swinging a sword during her time in the bamboo garden. She would also watch Yuan chop bamboo, as he was not just mindlessly striking at them but practicing sword techniques. Her sword techniques are a little rough. Shi Meili couldn't help but mutter after seeing Lan Yingying fight with the sword. If it weren't for her cultivation and the golden spirit pill, Lan Yingying would have lost quite easily. Moreover, her opponent wasn't too experienced in the sword either, which was the biggest reason that Lan Yingying was able to hold on for many minutes. "Looks like I need to teach her some basic sword techniques," Yuan mumbled. Hearing this, Tan Songyan said, "If it's just the basics, I can teach her." "Are you sure?" Yuan looked at her with a surprised face. "Why are you looking at me like that? While I may have debts to settle with you, she's completely innocent, and we're friends now," Tan Songyan sneered. "All right. I'll leave her in your hands," Yuan couldn't argue with her and nodded. After 10 long minutes, Lan Yingying barely managed to defeat her opponent after the disciple made a mistake. When Lan Yingying returned to her seat, her face was slightly flushed red, almost as if she was embarrassed about her performance. "There's no need to be embarrassed. You did very well for someone who's never really trained with the sword," Yuan said. "No, that's not why I am embarrassed." She quickly shook her head before continuing to speak. "I thought I would be able to replicate your movements because I have been watching you fight for years, but when I finally tried it, my body wouldn't listen to me." Lan Yingying thought she would be able to wield the sword just fine because she had witnessed Yuan use his sword for many years, so she didn't put as much effort into training the sword. However, she quickly realized her mistake and felt ashamed for it. "I'll put more effort into training the sword now," she sighed. "I wouldn't put too much thought into it if it were you. After all, once this trial is over, you will go back to your original fighting style," Shi Meili said. "While that may be true, we don't know how long we'll be in this trial. I don't want to be a burden, and even if I might never pick up the sword again, I think it's good to have some experience just in case I need to wield a weapon again in the future," she said. Number 7232 and number 8000. Sometime later, Ji Ran was called to the stage. Yuan and the others were very confident in Ji Ran's victory, unless he got extremely unlucky and was given an opponent that was far above his cultivation. 6th level Spirit Warrior. Yuan muttered after seeing Ji Ran's opponent. 6th level? That's 4 entire levels higher than him. Shi Meili exclaimed. "I wouldn't worry too much," Yuan said with a smile. Once the match began, Shi Meili quickly understood why Yuan had said such a thing. Despite being 4 levels below his opponent's cultivation, Ji Ran was able to dominate his opponent with ease. The Peerless Immortal Technique. He's using the Peerless Immortal Technique. Not just that, but his understanding of the technique seems to have reached the 2nd level. How can an outer court disciple who came from the bamboo garden have such talents? The audience exclaimed in shock after witnessing Ren display such a technique. It was not just the disciples who were shocked. Even the sect elders watching were greatly surprised, and many of them began considering accepting Ren as their disciple. That man. He's the Immortal Monastery's 4th sect leader, huh? The sect leader mumbled with a satisfied smile on his face. Sometime later, in just a few minutes, Ren secured his victory while leaving his opponent completely speechless. Once the sect elder declared Ren's victory, something unexpected happened. For the first time since the beginning of the tournament, the sect leader clapped, showing his amusement and acknowledgement. This shocked everyone there, as it was almost impossible to receive the sect leader's approval as an outer court disciple, much less a bamboo disciple. When the sect elders saw this, many of them made up their minds and decided to recruit Ren once the tournament ended. Thank you, Founder. Ren was incredibly excited to receive the sect leader's approval despite his age and experience. After all, the sect leader was a hero and legendary figure in his eyes. Time continued to pass, and eventually, it was Tan Songjian's turn to enter the stage. Her opponent was at the 5th level of Spirit Apprentice and also a fellow bamboo disciple, while Tan Songyan herself was at the 9th level of Spirit Apprentice. The result of the fight was apparent to everyone even before the fight began. A dozen exchanges later, Tan Songyun proved everyone right by defeating her opponent without even breaking a sweat. Then, right after Tan Songjian's match, Yuan heard his number being called. Number 8171 and number 300. Good luck, not that you need it. She merely chuckled. I'll be back soon. Yuan jumped onto the stage, and his cultivation shocked many disciples, even sect elders. He's at the peak of Spirit Warrior? But he's a bamboo disciple. The audience was also shocked when Ren entered the stage while being at the 2nd level of Spirit Warrior, but it was incomparable to Yuan, who was almost a step away from Spirit Master. The sect leader narrowed his eyes and frowned slightly after seeing Yuan's face, almost as if he found it unpleasant for some reason. He looks familiar. He mumbled to himself, but he didn't think too much about it. Chapter 1853 The 7th Round. Chapter 1853 The 7th Round. Yuan's opponent, a peak Spirit Apprentice, felt his confidence shatter the moment he realized the overwhelming gap between them, his expression turning deathly pale. Facing an opponent who was an entire realm above him, he immediately understood that this battle was anything but fair. But alas, there was nothing he could do about a lottery system that was completely random and entirely reliant on luck. With a deep sigh, the disciple accepted his fate. However, he didn't forfeit. After all, the sect leader was watching, and forfeiting would make him look mentally weak. While the disciple retrieved his spirit-grade sword, Yuan retrieved his earth-grade sword. The disciple's expression grew darker after seeing this. Not only was there a disparity in their cultivation, but his weapon was also outclassed an entire grade. You may begin the match. The sect elder announced. The moment the match began, Yuan kicked off the ground, launching himself forward like a bullet. In an instant, before his opponent could even react, Yuan's blade was already pressed against the disciple's neck. The cold touch of steel sent a jolt of terror through the disciple's body, causing him to freeze in place, his breath caught in his throat. I forfeit. The disciple quietly muttered. The match ended so quickly that some of the spectators missed it because they were not paying attention or they had to turn away for a second. What? The match ended already? That was the fastest one yet. The disciple got unlucky, encountering a monster like that bamboo disciple. Meanwhile, in the sect elder's area, Elder Sun's eyes were as wide as saucers. She couldn't believe what she'd just witnessed. He's already at the peak of Spirit Warrior? He had just become a cultivator not long ago. Elder Sun cried inwardly. Wow, his cultivation speed is quite ridiculous. I know disciples who have spent twice as much time as he has inside the hunting ground, but they're not even half as fast as him. Elder Jing exclaimed, her desire to have him as her disciple growing even stronger. Even Elder Sun was beginning to consider recruiting Yuan as her disciple. I may not be able to recruit Tian Yang as my disciple, but he's a different story, she thought to herself. However, the fact that he looks exactly like Tian Yang is weird. I don't know if he'll be able to ignore that. When Yuan returned to his seat, those around him stared at him with weird looks on their faces. Some had gazes of admiration, while others were fearful of him. The excitement for the next several matches was almost non-existent after Yuan's match. Since he had just gone on the stage and wouldn't fight again until the next round, Yuan closed his eyes and began to cultivate in silence after sealing his hearing. A few days later, Yuan opened his eyes when Lan Yingying woke him from his seclusion. "It's your turn," she said. "Thank you." The second round of the tournament had begun, and Yuan was the first amongst their group to go first this time. This time, his opponent was at the first level of Spirit Warrior. Once the match began, Yuan immediately went on the offensive. The Spirit Warrior was able to see his movements, but reacting to it was a different thing entirely. After barely avoiding Yuan's first strike, the disciple panicked and tripped, falling to the ground, and at the same time his butt touched the cold platform, Yuan's sword reached his neck. His opponents were so weak that he only needed basic sword techniques and raw speed to defeat them. The more the sect leader watched Yuan fight, the stronger his gut feeling about seeing Yuan before got. Sometime later, she merely entered the stage again. Her opponent had the same cultivation as her, so it didn't take long before she merely secured her victory. Ran's opponent was only a spirit apprentice, allowing him to take another easy win. Lan Yingying got unlucky and had to face an opponent who was at the third level of Spirit Warrior. Unsurprisingly, she lost after a few exchanges. I thought I would be able to win a few more, but alas, I only managed to win once before losing, she sighed as she sat back down. Statistically speaking, you're quite lucky when compared to the other bamboo disciples since the majority of them lost their first match, Ren said. That doesn't make it any better, she shook her head. Tan Songyan went several matches later, and her opponent was 3 levels higher than her. Despite the disparity, Tan Songyan managed to defeat her opponent and win. However, it was not an easy victory, and she even almost lost. Time passed, and the matches continued without any pauses. The sect elder judging the tournament would change every single day, and the audience would change over time. She merely managed to make it to round 5 before losing to an opponent who was 7 levels above her cultivation. Tan Songyun had to leave the tournament after losing in the 6th round. Her opponent was surprisingly at the peak of Spirit Warrior. Due to the massive disparity, Tan Songyun didn't even bother trying to fight and forfeited before the match could even begin. Unlike the true disciples of the Immortal Monastery, Tan Songyun had no problem forfeiting when obviously outmatched, as she was not afraid of losing face in front of the sect leader. Ren and Yuan continued to win their matches without any issues. Eventually, half a month had passed since the tournament began, and it just reached the 7th round. Number 8171 and number 121. Yuan entered the stage after hearing his number being called. His opponent, a handsome young man, entered the stage several seconds after he did. Normally, Yuan would face his opponents with a nonchalant expression. However, this time was different. When Yuan saw his opponent, he immediately frowned, and he could feel his blood heating up from anger. Killing intent? The sect elder on the stage frowned when she noticed that Yuan was emitting clear killing intent, but she didn't say anything since feuds between disciples were common. Chapter 1854 Unexplained Anger. Chapter 1854 Unexplained Anger. Although Yuan was emitting killing intent, he remained unaware of it himself. However, he did notice his unusual reaction toward his opponent. The sheer intensity of his aggression was unlike anything he had consciously intended. Yet, despite sensing this abnormality in himself, Yuan had no clear understanding of why he was reacting this way. A vague feeling stirred deep within him, but the reason remained elusive, leaving him with an unsettling sense of unfamiliarity toward his own actions. The handsome young man frowned after sensing Yuan's killing intent and said, "Hey, are you okay? Did I do something to offend you?" I don't know. Did you? Yuan asked, not because he was being snarky. He was genuinely curious if the disciple had offended him. I mean, this is our first time talking to each other. I can't imagine how ID managed to offend someone I'm meeting for the first time, the disciple responded. What's your name? Im Xiao Yang, Yuan suddenly introduced himself. Bai Zhan is my name, and I am ranked first in the outer court, the disciple introduced himself. Yuan had hoped that his name would trigger some kind of memory, but unfortunately, nothing came to mind. I think it's a misunderstanding. Sorry, Yuan apologized a moment later. No worries, Bai Zhan showed a calm and understanding smile. Since Bai Zhan was ranked first in the outer court, he was also at the peak of spirit warrior like Yuan. Let's have a good fight, Bai Zhan said as he retrieved an earth-grade sword. Yuan nodded and retrieved his weapon. Seeing this, the audience quickly woke up from their boredom and became filled with anticipation and excitement. Bai Zhan was a widely recognized and respected disciple not just in the outer court but also in the inner court. Not only was he considered a genius, but he also had quite the background, as his grandfather was a high-ranking sect elder in the Immortal Monastery. As for his reputation, Bai Zhan was known as a kind and generous man who would always help those around them. He was also humble and treated other disciples with respect despite his grandfather being a sect elder. All in all, he was liked by everybody and only had those who were jealous of his popularity as enemies. Are you ready to begin? The sect elder eventually asked. I am, Bai Zhan said. Yuan silently nodded. Then the match will begin now. Bai Zhan made the first move and immediately used the Peerless Immortal technique, boosting a technique that increased his bonus capabilities, causing his body to emit a black and red aura. Yuan used nothing but his sword to block the incoming strike before going on the defensive and avoiding the following attacks from Bai Zhan. Although it didn't show on his face, his blood was still heated. In fact, it was boiling hotter with each passing moment. This left Yuan puzzled, and he tried to figure out the reason for his anger as he fought Bai Zhan. What happened to the young master? Ren mumbled to himself. If Lan Yingying and the others were present, they would also be worried. However, they left after they lost their match so they could immediately continue their training. Since they were confident Yuan would win the entire tournament, they had no reason to stay for the whole thing. Time passed slowly. 5 minutes turned to 10, and then it became 15. Half an hour had passed since Yuan and Bai Zhan started their match, marking their match the longest since the start of the tournament, but neither one seemed to be on the verge of defeat. The audience mistook Yuan's seemingly defensive performance as a sign that he was struggling, believing he was at a disadvantage in the fight. Murmurs of speculation rippled through the crowd as they watched, convinced that Bai Zhan was pushing him back. However, Bai Zhan felt something entirely different. Though he couldn't pinpoint the exact reason, a deep sense of unease settled in his chest. There was something off about Yuan, something ominous that sent warning signals through his instincts. As the match reached the hour mark, Yuan's expression suddenly changed drastically. The calm, controlled demeanor he had maintained throughout the fight vanished in an instant, replaced by a look of pure fury. His previously tranquil face twisted with anger, and the killing intent that had momentarily faded came surging back with terrifying intensity. This time, it wasn't subtle, it was so overwhelming and palpable that everyone in the audience felt it. A chilling silence fell over the crowd as a heavy, suffocating pressure settled in the air, making it clear that something had shifted within Yuan. Meanwhile, a piece of memory flashed within Yuan's head. Hey, what are you? Bai Zhan began, his voice laced with nervousness as he sensed the drastic shift in Yuan's aura. Before he could even finish his sentence, Yuan suddenly unleashed the Peerless Immortal technique, amplifying his 1,000-mile sword strike to an overwhelming degree. With immense fierceness, Yuan's sword slashed through the air, sending a terrifying arc of spiritual energy hurtling toward Bai Zhan. Bai Zhan reacted just in time, managing to raise his sword to block the incoming strike. However, the sheer overwhelming force behind Yuan's attack was far beyond what he had expected. The impact ripped Bai Zhan's sword from his grasp, sending it flying through the air before the remaining energy of the strike crashed directly into his body, severing it in half. Everything happened so quickly that neither the audience nor the sect elders had time to react. By the time they fully processed what had transpired, it was already too late. Baijan's body lay split in two on the stage, his blood and organs scattered across the arena in a gruesome display. The silence that followed was deafening. Absolute shock and horror overtook the spectators, their eyes locked onto the carnage before them. Once the sect elder acting as the judge snapped out of his daze, he hastily declared, N number 8171 disqualified for killing his opponent. Chapter 1855 Punishment. Chapter 1855 Punishment. What? Ren stood up in shock after hearing that Yuan had been disqualified. However, he was more shocked by Yuan's seemingly random brutality. How dare you, disciple? The sect elder turned to face Yuan and shouted at him after declaring the results. Not only did you kill a fellow disciple, but it was even deliberate. As much as Ren wanted to believe in Yuan, even he couldn't deny that Yuan had purposefully killed his opponent, and it was more unbelievable that Yuan would lose control of his own power. Moreover, Yuan displayed clear killing intent before the match started and right before killing his opponent. Nobody would believe Yuan had killed his opponent by accident, and nobody did. He killed senior apprentice brother Baijan. No way. I knew there was something wrong with that bamboo disciple at the beginning of the match. So he had planned on murdering senior apprentice brother by this entire time. The audience was in an uproar because of Baijan's fame. Yuan ignored the audience and faced the sect elder to respond to her question. I have nothing to say. It's true. I deliberately killed him. Elder Jing and Elder Sun were left speechless after hearing his confession. They wanted to believe it was an accident, but Yuan's confession left no room for doubt. Ah, what a disaster. Even if he's a cultivation genius, he won't be able to get out of this unscathed. I wanted to recruit him as my disciple, too. One of the sect elders around Elder Sun suddenly sighed out loud. Even if the sect leader doesn't punish him, Senior Bai will definitely go after that disciple for killing his grandson. It was widely known that Elder Bai greatly doted and spoiled Baijan, his grandson, so it wouldn't shock anyone if Elder Bai went after Yuan for his actions. It was only a matter of when. Why? Why did you kill him? The sect elder questioned Yuan. He offended me in the past, Yuan calmly responded. What? Sorry, but that's all I can say, Yuan shook his head. That's not good enough. Meanwhile, the sect leader watched everything play out with a slight frown on his face. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and his expression shifted drastically. I remember now. Tian Yang, you bastard. After realizing why he found Yuan familiar, the sect leader leaped from his seat and landed directly in between Yuan and the sect elder. Sect leader. The sect elder immediately took a step back and bowed to him. The sect leader suddenly swung his sleeves, and in an instant, the world around him seemed to freeze. Everything, the audience, the disciples, the sect elders, even the spiritual energy in the air, abruptly stopped moving, as if time itself had been halted. Yuan, however, remained unaffected. Tian Yang, you bastard. What the fuck are you doing here? The sect leader roared, his eyes filled with killing intent. What? Yuan was taken aback by the sect leader's unexpected outburst, especially since Tian Yang's name came out of his mouth, and it was even accompanied by killing intent. However, despite his shock, Yuan managed to keep a straight face and responded, Tian Yang? Are you talking to me? My name is Xiao Yang, though. Bullshit. You may look a little younger, but you're definitely Tian Yang. The sect leader shouted. How else do you explain your mastery of the Peerless Immortal technique? There's no way you'd manage to reach that level in such a short time. You must have known it prior to coming here. After a moment of silence, Yuan said, It's true. I knew about the Peerless Immortal technique before coming here. However, that's only because I was taught it by sect leader Ren. I am his disciple, after all. What? The sect leader's expression suddenly froze. Ah, you don't recognize me because I had my mask back then, right? I was the one who asked if I could bring my companions, who would not be participating in the trial, with me. Sure enough, Yuan was wearing a mask before entering the Immortal gates. However, that mask disappeared alongside his real body, hence why the sect leader didn't recognize him. The sect leader fell silent with a pondering face. Now that I think about it, there's no way he could be Tian Yang. He looks too young, and that bastard should have died long ago. Eventually, the sect leader realized that he'd made a mistake. However, he didn't apologize and said, "Forget it. Now tell me, why did you kill that disciple?" "Because he offended me," Yuan said, keeping it vague on purpose. "I know you said he offended you in the past. However, you also claimed you'd never met him before." Yuan shook his head and explained, "That was actually a lie. That disciple just didn't remember me, and I agreed with him to make him lower his guard." The sect leader narrowed his eyes at Yuan. Eventually, he said, "Whatever. I don't care why you killed him, but you will be punished accordingly for breaking the rules." "What kind of punishment?" Yuan asked. 10 years in confinement," said the sect leader. Yuan raised an eyebrow and said, "You expect me to just accept this? I'm not spending 10 years in this trial, so you can just disqualify me from the trial entirely. Because you have something to do in the outside world? Then you should be happy to learn that time in this world flows differently, much slower than the outside world. Although you have spent over a year in this world, in reality, only a little over a month has passed in the outside world." "Really?" Yuan's eyes widened with surprise after learning this information. "What would I gain from making such a lie?" "I was going to announce this information sooner or later, anyway," revealed the sect leader. "Anyway, I will give you two choices since you are currently ahead of the pack. 1. You will spend 10 years in confinement, but your time limit to become an inner court disciple will be halted. Or 2. You will spend 2 years in confinement, but that timer will continue to tick even while in confinement, and all points you earn will be reduced by 50% for the next 5 years. Now, which do you choose?" Chapter 1856 2-Year Confinement. Chapter 1856 2-Year Confinement. For the first punishment, Yuan would spend 10 years in confinement, but his 10-year time limit to become an inner court disciple would be halted, so he could come out of the confinement and still have plenty of time to become an inner court disciple. However, the other participants would be far ahead of him. For his second option, instead of 10 years, he would only need to spend 2 years in confinement, but that 10-year time limit would not pause even while he is in confinement, giving him less time to reach his goal. Moreover, all of his earned points would be halved, slowing down his progress even further. No matter which option he chose, it would hurt his progress in the trial. 10 years is too long. I don't care even if I only have a year left to become an inner court disciple since I am already near the goal. The second option is definitely much better for me, even if I have to work twice as hard for the next 5 years. After spending a few moments considering his choices, Yuan responded, "I will choose the second punishment." The sect leader nodded and waved his sleeves again a moment later, unfreezing the time. "For deliberately killing a fellow disciple, I shall sentence you to 2 years of confinement, and all of the contributions you earned during this tournament will be nulled." The sect leader's judgment dumbfounded everybody. However, it was not because it was harsh. Instead, it was an extremely light sentence considering the crime Yuan had committed. Normally, if a disciple killed another disciple on purpose, they'd be crippled and expelled from the sect. Those with more background and protection would receive 10 years of confinement for punishment instead. Yet, Yuan would only receive 2 years for killing one of the most popular and well-liked disciples in the sect, not to mention Bai Zhan's grandfather was an elder of the sect. However, despite the seemingly unfair judgment and favoritism, nobody dared to utter any complaints. "Elder Huang, bring this disciple to the confinement chamber," the sect leader commanded the sect elder, who was also the judge. "As you command." The sect elder proceeded to retrieve a pair of handcuffs made of a type of red jade and cuffed them around Yuan's wrists. The moment the cuffs went on, Yuan stopped being able to feel or control his spiritual energy, almost as if had become immortal again. Then, the sect elder wrapped his spiritual energy around Yuan and flew away, taking Yuan away. Ren could only watch in disbelief as Yuan quickly disappeared from their sight. Meanwhile, the disciples all angrily stared at Yuan, their eyes filled with hatred and rage. Many of them even silently vowed to avenge Bai once Yuan emerged from his confinement. Once Yuan was taken away and the mess on the stage was cleaned up, the sect leader continued the tournament. However, the atmosphere had drastically changed, and everyone was busy talking about the incident. As for the bamboo disciples, those who were from his group recognized him and said, "Fuck, I knew that murderous bastard couldn't stop himself from killing again." "Huh? You know him?" "Yes, he was from my group in the bamboo garden. He is also the madman who went on a rampage and killed nearly everyone from my group. I heard about that incident even before leaving the bamboo garden." "So he was the one responsible for the massacre, huh? He looks nothing like a killer, though. Don't let his innocent appearance deceive you. His true appearance shows once he starts killing. How did he even manage to reach the peak of Spirit Warrior, anyway? Did he receive a special treasure for being the first one to reach the Immortal Monastery? Who knows? I don't even want to approach him, much less ask him." As for the other disciples, while they didn't dare to criticize the sect leader's judgment in his presence out loud, they did not hesitate to curse Yuan out. "That fucker Xiao Yang. I swear he's dead if I ever see him again. Senior apprentice brother Bai did not deserve such an end. He was such a kind and generous person. He gave me guidance when he saw me struggling in the training grounds even though I didn't ask for it. He also helped me a ton by giving me spirit stones to help with my cultivation. He even told me I didn't need to worry about returning it." The disciples reminisced about all the times Bai had done good and helped everyone. Meanwhile, the sect elder brought Yuan to the confinement chamber, which was located on a massive mountain. "You know, I'm actually glad the sect leader only gave you 2 years. Do you know why?" the sect elder suddenly said as they neared a dark, yawning cave entrance that seemed to lead into oblivion. Beside it stood a massive boulder, its size and shape perfectly suited to seal the opening like a door. "Why?" Yuan asked. "Because you'd only live longer if had given you a longer sentence. The moment you leave your confinement, Elder Bai, the grandfather of the disciple you killed, will be here to avenge his grandson and take your life. While a disciple is in confinement, they are essentially prohibited from contacting the outside world. This also meant the people outside were unable to contact him, and this included sect elders." Yuan didn't respond to the sect elder's words and only silently gazed at the dark cave entrance. The sect elder proceeded to remove Yuan's cuffs before kicking him in the back, sending him flying into the cave. "Enjoy what little time you have left, you bastard," the sect elder sneered, his voice laced with cold satisfaction. With a series of swift hand gestures, the massive boulder trembled before grinding into place, sealing the cave's entrance. Once he confirmed that Yuan had been sealed properly, he turned around and flew back to the arena. Chapter 1857 Confinement Chamber. Chapter 1857 Confinement Chamber. As the boulder settled into place, sealing the cave shut, Yuan took a moment to survey his surroundings. Though the cave appeared as if it were an abyss where no light could reach, a faint, eerie glow subtly illuminated the space. However, its source remained a mystery. The cave was surprisingly spacious, even larger than the room he had back in the bamboo garden. However, its conditions were harsh and unwelcoming. There was no proper floor, only the cold, uneven ground beneath him, layered with dirt and dust. Aside from the 2 pots placed at the far end of the space, the cave was utterly barren, not even the bare comfort of a bed to rest on. Yuan approached the pots and lifted their lids, revealing the pills inside. A single glance was enough for him to recognize their purpose. One pot contained hunger-suppressing pills, designed to stave off starvation without the need for actual food. The other held pills that would eliminate his Bodhi's need for waste elimination. It was clear that these were meant to sustain him just enough to survive, but nothing more. The spiritual energy inside the cave was also pathetically low, almost non-existent. Even if Yuan were to spend a decade cultivating there, his cultivation wouldn't see any noticeable improvements. I have to spend 2 years in this place, huh? Well, it won't be my first time, Yuan sighed with a bittersweet smile on his face. In the past, Tian would often find himself in confinement for breaking sect rules, mostly from fighting with other disciples. Of course, he would only spend a few days, weeks at most at a time in confinement, but when added up, it easily exceeded 2 years. During confinement, Tian would try to improve his martial techniques since it was a waste of time to cultivate. Now then, if my memories serve me correctly, I should be able to find that thing here. Yuan's gaze turned to look at a specific spot on the ground. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees and began digging with his bare hands, scooping away the cold, hard dirt. After digging about a meter deep, Yuan's fingers brushed against something hard and unnaturally cold. Its surface was smooth, too refined to be just another random rock buried in the dirt. He carefully unearthed the object, dusting away the loose soil until it was fully revealed. The moment his eyes confirmed it was exactly what he had been searching for, a quiet chuckle escaped his lips. A glimmer of amusement, even disbelief, flickered in his gaze as he held the object in his hands. I can't believe it's actually here. Even more unbelievable, I was put into the confinement chamber hiding this treasure. Although Yuan had never intended to visit the confinement chamber this soon, he had always planned to come here eventually. This place held something that had been on his mind since he arrived at the Immortal Monastery. Even if it wasn't guaranteed the treasure would exist, he still wanted to confirm it. Yuan spent the next few moments staring at the object in his grasp. It was small and perfectly round, its surface smooth and cool to the touch, almost identical to a monster core. Despite its unassuming size, small enough to be held between just 2 fingers, there was an undeniable weight to it, not in mass, but in significance. In the past, when Tian first found this treasure by pure coincidence and accident, he didn't know what it was or how to use it. However, he knew it was definitely a treasure, so he kept it with him for many years until he accidentally activated the treasure. However, even after activating the treasure, Tian did not realize its significance or how it'd benefit him for many more years. I can't believe I am actually holding you in my grasp again, Heaven Refining Crystal. Sure enough, this unassuming treasure eventually gave birth to the legendary Heaven Refining Physique. A one-of-kind physique so heaven-defying that it would transcend lifetimes, following Tian through his future reincarnations and the reason for his immense growth. Although Tian never uncovered the origins of the Heaven Refining Crystal, how it came into existence or why it had been buried within the Immortal Monastery's confinement chamber, none of that truly mattered to him. Once he finished admiring the Heaven Refining Crystal, Yuan brought his thumb to his mouth and bit down until blood welled up. Holding the crystal carefully, he let the crimson droplets fall onto its smooth surface. The moment his blood made contact, it didn't smear or roll off. Instead, it was absorbed instantly, as if the crystal were alive and thirsting for his essence. A faint glow began to emanate from within, signaling the start of something profound. Yuan continued to feed his blood to the Heaven Refining Crystal, watching as it eagerly absorbed every drop. The process seemed endless, and before he knew it, dizziness crept over him, his body growing weak from blood loss. Recognizing his limit, he finally stopped and reached for a hunger pill, placing it on his tongue. As it dissolved, a wave of warmth spread through his body. The pill not only satiated hunger, it also had healing properties that would heal minor injuries, such as paper cuts, and speed up recovery. With a tired exhale, he laid down on the cold. The crystal remained clutched in his hand, its surface now faintly pulsing with life. Though the cave was bleak and desolate, Yuan closed his eyes and quickly fell asleep. Once he woke up several hours later, Yuan immediately started feeding his blood to the Heaven Refining Crystal again, and he would repeat this process for almost an entire year. Meanwhile, the tournament ended 2 weeks after Yuan's match. As for the results, Ren had managed to win up to the 10th round before losing in the 11th round to someone at the peak of Spirit Warrior. Even with his experience and the Peerless Immortal technique, he was unable to bridge the gap of almost an entire realm. In the end, none of the bamboo disciples managed to win the tournament, with Ji Ran lasting the longest and earning the most contribution. Chapter 1858 Elder Bai. Chapter 1858 Elder Bai. Once the tournament concluded, Ji Ran wasted no time rushing back to find Shimeli and the others to notify them of the situation. What? Shimeli's voice rang out in sheer disbelief as she processed the news. Lan Yingying, on the other hand, was so stunned that words completely failed her. She simply stood there, wide-eyed, unable to form a response. Meanwhile, Tan Songyun furrowed her brows, her expression more puzzled than shocked. Unlike the others, she wasn't just overwhelmed, she was trying to make sense of the situation. He deliberately killed a disciple and even admitted to it? Why would he do such a thing? Tan Songyun wondered out loud. I don't know, and we won't be able to find out until he leaves confinement in 2 years, Ji Ran sighed. You mean we won't be able to contact him for 2 whole years? Lan Yingying finally spoke, her voice trembling from worry. Ji Ran shook his head. Unfortunately, we won't. Once someone enters confinement, nobody is allowed to contact them besides the sect leader. We can't sneak him out even if we want to, since the boulder that seals the place is protected with formations. I don't know why Yuan killed that disciple, but I'm sure he had a good reason for doing so, Shimeli sighed, showing her unconditional trust in him. I also trust he wouldn't kill someone randomly, but even if he had a good reason, the sect wouldn't care about it. Regardless of his reason, he killed a disciple, and in the presence of the sect leader, no less. The disciples also seemed like they wanted to rip his throat out, Ji Ran said. Will he be able to cultivate while in confinement? Lan Yingying then asked. No, the confinement chambers also prevent the prisoners from cultivating by depriving them of spiritual energy. The young master will have to spend the next 2 years doing mental cultivation or training his martial techniques. So we'll have to make sure we're powerful enough to protect him when he emerges in 2 years? Shimeli wondered out loud. I don't think we'll be able to catch up with the young master's progress even with 2 years, but we can try, Ji Ran said. Meanwhile, in the sect leader's office, an old man stood trembling before the sect leader. His eyes were bloodshot, tears still streaming down his weathered face, yet his sorrow was eclipsed by the sheer fury burning within him. His expression was a storm of anguish and rage, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. This old man was Elder Bai, Bai Zhan's grandfather. Although he had been outside the sect for business, he rushed back to the sect after learning about his beloved grandson's death. Sect leader. Please let me avenge my grandson, who did nothing wrong and was unjustly murdered by some psycho. Elder Bai roared, his voice filled with anguish and anger. He had also heard about the sect leader showing favoritism to Yuan by giving him a lenient punishment, which is why he didn't go straight to the confinement chamber to find Yuan. As much as he was enraged about his grandson's death, it did not cloud his judgment. I am willing to step down from my position as the Grand Elder as long as I can avenge my grandson. The position of Grand Elder stood at the pinnacle of the sect's hierarchy, second only to the sect leader. After listening to Elder Bai's impassioned plea, the sect leader finally spoke, his voice calm yet weighted with authority. I won't say you are forbidden from seeking vengeance for your grandson, he said, his gaze steady. But as the Grand Elder, you must carry yourself with grace and dignity, even in the face of vengeance. Do not let your grief cloud your judgment, nor let your wrath taint the honor you have upheld for so long. His words were not a denial, nor an approval, but a warning, a reminder that even vengeance had its own path to follow. Elder Bai's eyes gleamed with newfound determination as he realized the sect leader hadn't explicitly forbidden him from pursuing Yuan. However, despite his burning desire for revenge, he knew that as a Grand Elder, personally executing a disciple, especially in a fit of rage, would bring severe consequences. Losing face before the sect's disciples was of little concern to him, but his reputation outside the sect was another matter entirely. His standing in the wider cultivation world was not just his own, it was tied to the Immortal Monastery itself. A reckless act of vengeance could tarnish not only his name but also the sect's prestige, drawing unwanted scrutiny from outsiders. Clenching his fists, Elder Bai understood that he needed to tread carefully. If he wanted justice, or vengeance, he would have to be smart about it. Elder Bai left shortly after to begin planning his revenge. At the same time, Elder Jing and Elder Sun were having a conversation on a similar subject. So, what are you going to do? Will you try to protect that disciple from Elder Bai? Elder Jing asked Elder Sunday. Elder Sun let out a dry chuckle before shaking her head. Who are you talking to? Me? I'm just an ordinary sect elder who can't even follow the rules, she said, her voice laced with self-mockery. Elder Bai, on the other hand, is the Grand Elder, the second most powerful figure in the entire sect. If he decided to kill me just to get to Shaoyang, he wouldn't even blink. Protecting that boy? That would be nothing short of suicide. Despite her words, there was something unreadable in her expression, as if she wasn't entirely convinced by her own words. Elder Jing raised an eyebrow and said, while you may be an ordinary sect elder on the surface, your real background is something else entirely. With a single command, you could have even the sect leader bow to you, much less a mere grand elder. Elder Sun's expression darkened the moment her background was brought up. A sharp frown creased her beautiful face as she snapped, her voice laced with anger, you know I don't like my background being mentioned. I will die before I ask them for help. Sorry, Elder Jing quickly apologized after realizing her mistake. Chapter 1859 Mysterious Cavern. Chapter 1859 Mysterious Cavern. Once Elder Jing left, Elder Sun sighed. Why did he kill Baijan? He didn't seem like a vicious person. Maybe he has a good reason. Elder Sun would spend the next several days contemplating Yuan's situation. Time passed, and the bamboo disciples continued to progress their cultivation. Shimeli and the others began training harder than usual to improve their prowess as fast as possible to surpass Yuan so they could protect him when he inevitably emerged from his confinement. When they were not grinding points at the hunting grounds, Shimeli focused on her cultivation while Lan Yingying practiced her sword techniques with Tan Songyun. Ji Ran focused on improving his cultivation and farming points alone as usual. The true disciples eventually stopped talking about Yuan and Baijan's death after many months, but that didn't mean they'd forgotten about it or stopped caring. They were simply biding their time until Yuan returned. That said, only the outer court and some inner court disciples who knew and were close to Baijan cared about the situation. The core disciples couldn't care less about some drama in the outer court and focused on improving themselves. Meanwhile, Yuan would do nothing but feed the heaven-refining crystal his blood until he grew tired and had to sleep. However, as Yuan slept, his mind was consumed by incredibly vivid dreams, memories so detailed and lifelike that they felt more like relived experiences than mere illusions. These were not ordinary dreams but fragments of Tian Yang's past resurfacing. These memories were mostly of Tian Yang's days as a disciple inside the Immortal Monastery, but after a few months, memories of his time at Han Zexian's tomb resurfaced, mainly memories of his time inside the mountain containing Han Zexian's legacy. After dashing into the mountain to escape from the Immortal clans and the 7 Divine Sword Peak sect leader, Tian Yang found himself on an impossibly long, narrow path. The corridor stretched far beyond what the mountain's exterior should have allowed, defying logic and space itself. Each step echoed unnaturally, the walls pressing in with an eerie stillness, as if the very mountain was watching him. However, as freaked out as he was, Tian Yang could only move forward, as the only entrance and exit had closed behind him. After walking for days without rest, Tian Yang finally reached the end of the path. There, beyond the oppressive darkness, lay a small cavern bathed in an unearthly light. Unlike the narrow passage behind him, this space was open and strangely serene, its illumination seemingly without a clear source. The air here felt different, ancient and mythical, as if infused with the lingering presence of something beyond mortal comprehension. Despite its modest size, the cavern exuded a quiet majesty, as though it held secrets untouched by time. At the center of the cavern, a small waterfall cascaded down smooth stone, its gentle flow creating a serene ambience. At first glance, it appeared unremarkable, but Tian Yang quickly noticed the water was saturated with dense spiritual energy, far richer than anything he had encountered before. Even more astonishing was what lay at the base of the waterfall, a small yet vibrant garden flourishing in its midst. Several exotic plants thrived there, their leaves shimmering with an otherworldly radiance. Though Tian Yang didn't recognize them, their overwhelming aura and the sheer intensity of their spiritual energy left no doubt in his mind. These were priceless treasures, each one likely more valuable than the Immortal Monastery's entire collections of rare herbs. A place like this, it wasn't natural. It was a sanctuary, hidden away from the world for whatever reason. Why did Ren Xia create a place like this? And why did he want me to come here? Tian Yang mumbled to himself as he continued surveying the place. At one end of the cavern, Tian Yang's gaze fell upon a peculiar sight, a square-shaped platform, resembling a bed, but made entirely of an unknown stone-like material. Unlike ordinary stone, however, this one seemed to be alive with energy, drawing in the densest spiritual essence from the surrounding cavern. The sheer amount of accumulated energy was so immense that a thick mist hovered above the platform, swirling like a living entity. It was clear this wasn't a mere resting place, but a cultivation platform of unparalleled quality. The stone itself was likely a rare, priceless material that refined and amplified the spiritual energy of anyone who meditated upon it. A treasure like this was beyond value and would start wars with experts battling for its ownership. Then, Tian Yang's eyes were drawn to the cavern walls, where meticulously engraved texts covered nearly every surface. Each word was carved with precision, the deep, sharp strokes indicating they had been etched by a sword or dagger rather than a mere chisel or hand. The inscriptions carried an air of intent, each stroke imbued with meaning, as if the one who had written them had poured their very soul into the engravings. Though Tian Yang couldn't immediately decipher them, he could sense their significance. They weren't just ordinary writings, they held knowledge, perhaps even secrets left behind by the creator of this place. As he stepped closer, he felt a faint resonance from the words, as though they contained lingering traces of the writer's will. Were they cultivation insights? Sword techniques? Or perhaps the final words of someone who had sought refuge in this mysterious place? With a deep breath, Tian Yang reached out, his fingers brushing against the ancient engravings. The moment his skin made contact, a sudden, bone-chilling sensation surged through his entire being. It wasn't just cold, it was an unnatural, penetrating force that seemed to freeze his very soul. His instincts flared in alarm, and without hesitation, he yanked his hand back. Just what in heaven's name is this place? And what the fuck am I doing here? Tian Yang swallowed nervously as he stared at his trembling hands. Once he calmed down, Tian Yang continued exploring the cavern, his heart pounding with anticipation and nervousness. Chapter 1860 A Cultivator's Paradise. Chapter 1860 A Cultivator's Paradise. As Tian Yang continued exploring the cavern, his attention was drawn to a wooden shelf nestled against one of the cavern walls. Despite the passage of time, the wood remained intact, exuding a faint aura that suggested it had been reinforced with spiritual energy. Resting atop the shelf were numerous spatial rings, and when Tian Yang peeked inside one of them, he was surprised to find it completely filled with pills. However, Tian Yang didn't know what kind of pills they were since his knowledge of pills was very limited. He checked the other spatial rings after placing down the first spatial ring. Once again, it was filled with pills, but they looked and smelled different from the previous pills. Are all of these spatial rings filled with pills? Tian Yang muttered to himself as he continued finding more pills with each new spatial ring he checked. Sure enough, after checking every single spatial ring, Tian Yang found nothing but pills. After putting the last spatial ring down, Tian Yang returned to the center of the room and sat down on the ground. A waterfall, priceless herbs, spatial rings with countless pills, a cultivation platform, and unknown words on the walls. What the hell was Ren Xia doing in this place? And what am I supposed to do here? Can I even leave this place? Tian Yang was filled with questions but nobody to answer them. Eventually, he started experimenting and studying the place in more detail. First, Tian Yang decided to test the waterfall's water. Cupping his hands, he took a small sip. The moment the cool liquid passed his lips, a wave of vitality surged through his body. His fatigue melted away instantly, his energy rapidly recovering as if he had undergone days of deep meditation in mere seconds. However, the water's effects didn't stop there. A clarity unlike anything he had experienced before washed over him. His mind felt sharper, and his thoughts more refined. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing him to perceive everything with greater focus and understanding. Tian Yang's eyes widened. This wasn't just ordinary spiritual water, it was a sacred elixir, capable of restoring not only the body but also sharpening the mind. The significance of such a resource was immeasurable. Even in the most powerful sects, water of this caliber would be considered an irreplaceable treasure. Next were the herbs. Although they looked delicious, Tian Yang didn't actually dare to consume them. Unlike the waterfall, which seemed to flow endlessly, the herbs were limited, and he was worried they might not regrow once consumed. The most he could do was inspect them, but since he was not an expert in this field, he quickly gave up and moved to the cultivation bed. The moment Tian Yang sat on the cultivation bed and took a deep breath, he could feel his cultivation improving by leaps and bounds, and he hadn't even started cultivating yet. With the cultivation bed, he could progress his cultivation with ease and maybe even catch up to the experts from the Immortal clans, regardless of his talents. As days turned to weeks, Tian Yang found himself intoxicated by the experience. The rapid ascension of his cultivation, the intoxicating surge of power, it was unlike anything he had ever known. His body and mind craved more, urging him to stay, to immerse himself deeper into this endless growth. And so, he remained seated for months, unmoving, consumed entirely by the boundless potential of the cultivation bed. Eventually, Tian Yang emerged from his cultivation, and his peak Spirit King had soared past Spirit Emperor and Spirit Sovereign, entering Spirit Enlightenment and stopping at the peak of Spirit Enlightenment by the end. To increase his cultivation by 3 entire realms within just a few months was unheard of and unprecedented. Moreover, Tian Yang noticed that his cultivation was no longer suppressed to Spirit King despite still being inside Han Zexian's tomb. I am actually still inside Han Zexian's tomb, right? I am not actually dead and in Cultivator's paradise, right? Tian Yang wondered out loud. He wouldn't be surprised if the mountain actually existed in a different space and away from Han Zexian's tomb, which would explain how he could walk for days without encountering an end. After emerging from his cultivation, Tian Yang took another sip of the waterfall before turning his focus to the words on the wall. However, he quickly gave up and went to check on the pills inside the spatial rings again. Since there was no way for him to know their effects without taking them outside to get examined, Tian Yang had to consume them and examine their effects using his own body. How long have these pills been here? Pills shouldn't expire, right? It was a common rumor that pills never expired, their potency lasting for eternity. However, this was far from the truth. In reality, pills that aren't properly sealed or stored will gradually lose their effectiveness over time. The spiritual energy infused within them would slowly dissipate, weakening their medicinal properties until they eventually became nothing more than ordinary, powerless pills. If left unchecked for too long, some pills would deteriorate to the point where they crumbled like brittle crackers at the slightest touch. After embracing himself for the worst, Tian Yang picked a random spatial ring and retrieved a pill from it before consuming the pill. After consuming the pill, Tian Yang sat in silence, focusing intently on any changes occurring within his body, his back soaked in cold sweat. However, as the minutes stretched on, his anticipation slowly turned to confusion. Nothing happened. His body felt the same. His energy remained unchanged. The pill had dissolved, yet there was no reaction, not even the faintest ripple of medicinal effect. Tian Yang frowned. Had the pill lost its potency over time? Or did the pill have an effect that couldn't be felt? Since he had no way of knowing, Tian Yang could only pick up a different spatial ring and consume a different pill. The hell? Nothing's happening. Tian Yang exclaimed in disappointment when the second, third, and even fourth spatial rings contained pills that seemingly had no effect. Yet, he continued examining the pills, throwing unknown pills with unknown effects into his mouth without any of his initial hesitation. Chapter 1861 Han Zexian's Diary. Chapter 1861 Han Zexian's Diary. After tirelessly picking up and testing the pills from one spatial ring after another, Tian Yang finally sensed a change in his body upon consuming a pill from the 10th and final ring. At first, he braced himself, expecting a surge of spiritual energy, perhaps an increase in his cultivation or physical strength. However, what he experienced was something different, a sharpening of his mind. It was similar to the effects of the waterfall's water but more concentrated. His thoughts became clearer, more refined, as if a fog he hadn't even realized was there had been lifted. Every detail around him appeared more vivid, and his comprehension of his surroundings heightened, almost as if the strength of his divine sense had been amplified 100 times. Since the 10th spatial ring had pills that actually worked, Tian Yang put it aside and apart from the other rings in case he needed them. Now that Tian Yang was done with the spatial rings, there was only one thing left in the cavern that he could realistically do, which was to return to studying the engravings on the wall. After staring at the wall for days, Tian Yang realized one thing, that everything in the cavern seemed to assist Tian Yang or whoever was present in studying the engravings. The waterfall and pills increased his mental strength, allowing him to be sharper, more observant, and more perceptive. The cultivation bed sped up his cultivation speed, which would not just improve his mental capacity and strength but also increase his longevity, giving him more time to study the engravings. Everything points to the engravings on the walls, but what does it mean? Is it a cultivation technique? Maybe a martial technique? I have no clue. Ah, Han Zexian, why didn't you leave behind some clues for your successor? After a few more days, Tian Yang took a break from the engravings and went to wash his face with the waterfall and then went on another cultivation session. This time, he spent a month cultivating and reached the peak of Divine Warrior. Normally, a cultivator must face a heavenly tribulation upon reaching a new major realm, but due to Tian Yang's unique location, he did not have to face one. Upon reaching Divine Warrior, Tian Yang learned Divine Gaze. Although most people would learn it a little later, Tian Yang was able to learn it early due to the amount of treasures had consumed that boosted his senses. Once Tian Yang grew accustomed to Divine Gaze, he decided to put it to use, scanning the cavern once more with his enhanced perception. As his gaze swept across the chamber, something caught his attention, something he hadn't noticed before. Once Tian Yang grew accustomed to Divine Gaze, he decided to put it to use, scanning the cavern once more with his enhanced perception. As his gaze swept across the chamber, something caught his attention, something he hadn't noticed before. Huh? What's that? He muttered, his brows furrowing as his eyes locked onto the cultivation bed. At first glance, it appeared no different from before, perfectly shaped, exuding boundless spiritual energy. But now, under the scrutiny of Divine Gaze, he could see faint, almost imperceptible lines along its edges. It wasn't just a solid platform, it was hiding something beneath. Curious, Tian Yang stepped forward and placed his palms against the smooth surface. Applying force, he pushed. To his surprise, the entire cultivation bed shifted. A low, grating sound echoed through the cavern as the platform slid away, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Tian Yang's heart pounded with curious anticipation as he reached inside to grab the only object hidden within. When he held it before his eyes, Tian Yang could see clearly that the hidden object was an old, worn-out book. He wondered if it was a technique, but his eyes widened with surprise after reading the title of said book. The title was a single, simple word, and it was the word diary. Tian Yang wasted no time and opened the book to the first page, immediately reading its contents. Soon, Tian Yang realized that the book contained vital information about the cavern, such as the herb's identity, as well as the unknown pill's effects. Heavens! They were all longevity pills? No wonder why I didn't feel anything after consuming them. But Han Zexian was an immortal. Why would he need longevity pills when he already can live forever without them? Tian Yang's question was answered as he read more of the Han Zexian's diary. Apparently, The engravings on the cavern walls contained information about a powerful and mysterious entity, one that might be omnipotent, an existence that held absolute control over the divine heavens. The words carved into the stone seemed to whisper secrets far beyond mortal comprehension, knowledge that transcended even the most powerful cultivators. However, there was a terrible price for attempting to decipher them. Any effort to understand these inscriptions would directly consume one's longevity. It wasn't just a warning, it was a curse woven into the very text itself. The engravings were not meant for the unworthy, and those who sought their meaning would pay the cost with the most precious currency of all, their lifespan. As Tian continued reading the diary, his vision blurred, and an overwhelming fatigue washed over him. His eyelids grew heavy, his limbs sluggish, as if an unseen force was siphoning his very essence. It didn't take long before Tian realized it wasn't ordinary fatigue but his longevity being drained. The diary wasn't just a record, it was cursed knowledge, just like the engravings on the wall. Every word he read came at a cost, and the longer he continued, the more of his lifespan was sacrificed. This curse was so powerful and unforgiving that even immortals, beings with seemingly infinite lifespans, were not immune to its effects. No matter how vast one's life force was, this curse would make them seem finite if they delved too deep into its knowledge. Just what kind of entity is so dangerous that even learning about it would shorten one's existence? Tian wondered out loud. As insane and perilous as it was, Tian couldn't suppress the burning curiosity rising within him. Even knowing the cost, even feeling his lifespan slipping away with every word, he couldn't stop. Despite the dangers, despite the risk of his own lifespan being drained away, he wanted to know. If the heavens sought to keep this entity a secret, then he would defy the heavens themselves. Chapter 1862 Outer Gods. Chapter 1862 Outer Gods. In order to continue reading Han Zexian's diary, Tian had to constantly replenish his diminishing longevity with longevity pills. Each of the longevity pills granted Tian 100 years of life. Although this may not seem like much at a glance, these pills were unique in the sense that they could be consumed endlessly. While most longevity pills could only be consumed once in a lifetime before their effects ceased, Han Zexian's longevity pills were an exception. They had no limit. As long as one had an endless supply, they could achieve eternal life. However, such pills were exceedingly rare and unimaginably valuable. Their creation required specific herbs, ones that were nearly impossible to find. These herbs could only thrive in the most harsh and unforgiving environments, where even the strongest cultivators would struggle to survive. Yet, the very same herbs, once thought to exist only in the most extreme landscapes, were right here in the cavern, growing beneath the waterfall. It was clear that Han Zexian had concocted the longevity pills by himself using the herbs he'd grown. However, Tian was not an alchemist, so there was no way for him to utilize the herbs before him. This meant that once the supply of longevity pills ran out, Tian would not be able to acquire more. Fortunately for him, Han Zexian had left behind an immense supply of longevity pills, enough to increase his longevity by tens of millions of years. Yet, at the rate his longevity was being depleted, Tian wasn't sure the supply would last him until he could learn the secrets of the cavern. However, Tian didn't care and continued. Time slipped away like grains of sand through Tian's fingers. With his mind wholly immersed in Han Zexian's diary, he lost all sense of the outside world. 1 year, 10 years, 20 years. In what felt like an instant, 25 years had passed since Tian first set foot inside Han Zexian's cavern. During this time, Tian had managed to improve his cultivation to the peak of immortal ascension, and had also long finished Han Zexian's diary and was now studying the engravings on the walls. Just finishing Han Zexian's diary had cost Tian over 1,000,000 years of his lifespan. Yet, he felt no regret. The knowledge he had gained was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Through the diary, he had not only unraveled the mystery of Han Zexian's existence but also uncovered his purpose in the cavern. According to Han Zexian, he had somehow stumbled upon forbidden knowledge, information about entities so powerful they surpassed all mortal and even immortal comprehension. These entities not only controlled the divine heavens, but they could even be dictators of their universe. Han Zexian referred to these unfathomable beings as outer gods, entities beyond the reach of mortals, immortals, and even divine beings. Their very existence defied logic, and their power was so absolute that even the highest realms of cultivation could not comprehend them. Han Zexian became obsessed with these beings, dedicating the rest of his life to studying them. His desire to learn more eventually evolved into something far more dangerous. He sought to contact them. This pursuit led him to this very cavern, a place Tian had initially assumed belonged to Han Zexian. However, in truth, the cavern wasn't Han Zexian's creation, and the cultivation bed and engravings on the wall existed before Han Zexian's arrival. The only things that truly belonged to him were the herbs and the longevity pills. As for Han Zexian's tomb, while it was indeed created by Han Zexian, this cavern was never originally part of it. In truth, the cavern existed somewhere else entirely, and the tomb itself was nothing more than a method of transportation, a gateway that led here. Tian had suspected this from the very beginning, so he wasn't too surprised about it. Tian hoped to find a translation of the engravings on the walls, but Han Zexian never managed to decipher it, or so Tian thought, as the diary lacked any mention of it. Tian looked at the longevity pills and mumbled to himself. Maybe Han Zexian actually managed to contact these outer gods, hence why he left his supplies here and disappeared. If Han Zexian had failed, it would have only been because his entire lifespan had been drained away from trying to decipher the engravings. However, the abundance of remaining longevity pills suggested otherwise. If he had perished from longevity depletion, he would have consumed every last pill. The fact that so many pills were still left behind meant Han Zexian hadn't met his end in such a way. After spending over a decade studying the engravings, Tian had begun to understand it. While he didn't decipher the words, he could somehow feel and understand them. It was a weird phenomenon that Tian couldn't comprehend himself. As time passed and the supply of longevity pills neared depletion, Tian at last grasped the true meaning of the engravings. Although the engravings didn't reveal any new information about the outer gods, they revealed something much more valuable. A method of contacting the outer gods. This engraving is actually a technique. One that lets me contact the outer gods. He clenched his fists in excitement. Perhaps Han Zexian actually managed to understand the engravings and fulfilled his goal of contacting the outer gods. However, as much as Tian yearned to contact the outer gods, a deep sense of unease held him back. What would happen to him if he succeeded? After all, Han Zexian had likely attempted it and succeeded, yet he was nowhere to be found. No body, no trace, as if he had been erased from existence itself. The unknown loomed before Tian, both tempting and terrifying. Despite everything, I am still stuck in this place. I might as well give it a try and see what happens. Tian sighed, his gaze lingering on the ancient engravings. He had uncovered forbidden knowledge, deciphered the truth behind the outer gods, and sacrificed an unimaginable portion of his lifespan. Yet, he remained trapped inside the cavern with no way out. Han Zexian's diary, despite its wealth of knowledge, contained no mention of a way to leave the cavern. Tian was no different from a caged beast, left with only two choices: to wait for an escape that may never come, or to take the risk and reach out to the outer gods. After spending days pondering about it, Tian decided to contact the outer gods. Chapter 1863 Encounter with an Outer God. Chapter 1863 Encounter with an Outer God. After deciding that he would contact the outer gods, Tian spent another few months learning the technique used to contact them. Once he was prepared, Tian sat on the cultivation bed, took a deep breath, and began muttering, "O ancient gods beyond the veil of reason, where time coils and the stars weep, heed my call. I invoke the nameless, whose shadows consume light, whose whispers unravel fate. Through the fracture of all that is, through the silence where even Tao crumbles, descend and make this world your own." However, nothing happened after Tian activated the technique and recited the summoning phrase. Frowning, he looked around, his brows slightly raised at the anticlimactic result. Did it fail? He muttered, half expecting some kind of reaction. Just as he prepared to attempt the ritual again, his vision suddenly went blank. A weightless sensation overtook him, and the cavern's familiar presence vanished. The very atmosphere shifted, becoming something utterly alien, something beyond anything he had ever experienced. He was no longer where he had been. The cavern, the engravings, the cultivation bed, all of it was gone. Instead, an endless void stretched before him, vast and incomprehensible. Tiny flickering lights dotted the darkness, resembling distant stars, yet they felt eerily different, as if they were watching him. Unbeknownst to Tian, he had been transported to the starry sky, a realm beyond the sky of the divine heavens and a place untouched by mortals or immortals at his time. Where am I? How did I get here? What happened to the outer gods? Tian's voice trembled slightly as he turned, searching for any sign of familiarity in the boundless abyss. A moment of silence stretched across the void. Then, a voice, deep, profound, and utterly overwhelming, resounded through his very being. By outer gods, are you referring to me? The sheer weight of its presence sent shivers down Tian's spine. Before him, an immense silhouette emerged from the abyss, its scale so vast that his mind struggled to comprehend it. If he were to compare his own size to the silhouette, it'd be like comparing an ant to an elephant. The figure bore the shape of a human, yet its form was anything but ordinary. 10 arms stretched outward, 5 on each side, exuding an aura of absolute dominion. Tian's breath was caught in his throat. He had sought the outer gods. And now, he stood before one. An outer god, they really exist. Tian swallowed nervously. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but unfortunately, I cannot answer them at the moment. That said, since you are the first human to ever decipher my engravings, I shall grant you a wish. Tell me, what do you desire? Can you grant me any wish? Tian asked after snapping out of his daze. The outer god did not respond, almost as if it deemed it was pointless to answer such an obvious question. After a brief moment of contemplation, Tian finally spoke, his voice steady despite the overwhelming presence before him. I have only experienced losses throughout my life. Time and time again, I've watched everything slip through my fingers because I was too weak to protect anything. His fists clenched, not in anger, but in unwavering resolve. If I could have any one thing in my life, it would be power, the power to protect what I want to protect. However, with that said, his gaze hardened as he looked up at the towering entity. I don't want such power to be handed to me. There was no hesitation in his words. Therefore, what I want is talent, the talent to surpass everyone. This was not a request for mere strength. It was a demand for the right to forge his own path. After a moment of silence, the outer god spoke. So you wish not for strength but the chance to acquire the strength you desire, huh? What an amusing human. Then it continued, unfortunately, I cannot grant that wish. What? Tian showed a puzzled frown upon hearing this, as he thought the outer god was omnipotent and could grant him any wish. I cannot give you what you already have. Although you may not be aware of it, you already possess such talents. That's ridiculous. If I had even a sliver of talent in me, I wouldn't have struggled so much. Tian shouted, his voice raw with frustration, feeling like he was being mocked. You don't have to believe me. Regardless, I cannot grant you that wish. You may choose a different wish. Tian sighed, I don't have another wish. You can grant me whatever you want. In that case, I shall grant you something I believe is befitting of your existence, the outer god declared, its voice reverberating through the endless abyss. Before Tian could react, a golden light materialized in the vast darkness, its radiant light pulsing with an indescribable energy. It drifted forward, moving with an ethereal grace, as though drawn by fate itself. In the next instant, the stars shot toward him. Tian barely had time to process what was happening before it pierced into his chest, disappearing into his body. What did you just do to me? Tian asked. That is for you to find out. Suddenly, a powerful ripple surged through the distant void, distorting the fabric of space itself. The presence was vast and ominous, something beyond Tian Yang's comprehension. The outer god's gaze shifted toward the disturbance. "I shall end our conversation here," it declared. Just as the abyss began to tremble, the outer god's attention returned to Tian Yang for one last moment. "This will not be the last time we speak, for it seems our existences are intertwined by fate. Until next time, human." Before Tian Yang could respond, the void around him collapsed. The starry abyss twisted, and his consciousness was forcefully pulled away, as though reality itself was ejecting him from this realm. When Tian Yang snapped out of his daze, he found himself back inside the cavern, seated on the cultivation bed just as he had been before, almost as if his encounter with the outer god was only a mere dream. Chapter 1864 Leaving Han Zexian's Cavern. Chapter 1864 Leaving Han Zexian's Cavern. After returning to the cavern, Tian Yang's body was immediately drenched in sweat. A crushing exhaustion weighed down on him, as if every fiber of his being had been wrung dry. His breath came in ragged gasps, his limbs trembling uncontrollably. Despite having accumulated over 1,000,000 years of longevity, his brief encounter with the outer god had drained nearly all of it away. Tian Yang, ignoring his exhaustion, hurried to the shelf and snatched the only spatial ring that still contained longevity pills. Inside, only about 100 pills remained, enough to increase his longevity by another 10,000 years. Without hesitation, he popped a pill into his mouth. As it dissolved, warmth spread through his body, and his vitality slowly stabilized. So that was an outer god, huh? Unbelievable. Despite just meeting one himself, Tian Yang still found it difficult to believe such a powerful entity could exist. Wait a second, that outer god claimed I was the first human to decipher its engravings. What about Han Zexian? What happened to him? Tian Yang had originally believed that Han Zexian had deciphered the engravings and successfully contacted the outer gods long before him, but he turned out to be wrong. This made Tian Yang wonder about Han Zexian's mysterious disappearance. However, Tian Yang didn't dwell too long on Han Zexian. As intriguing as the mystery was, there was something far more pressing at hand, his own predicament. Even after contacting the outer god, he was still stuck inside the cavern with no way out. With no other options, Tian Yang started searching every nook and cranny of the cavern. Though he had taken a quick look when he first arrived, he had only checked the obvious spots. Now, with no choice but to be thorough, he began a more careful search, hoping to find something he had missed before. However, even after looking through the entire place not once but twice, Tian Yang was unable to find anything. Just as he was about to give up, Tian Yang's gaze suddenly turned toward the only entrance to the cavern. "There's no way, right?" After a brief moment of stillness, Tian Yang turned toward the cavern's entrance. As he crossed the threshold, he found himself once more on the dark, winding path, the very same passage that had first led him into the cavern. However, there was something different about it. Sensing this, Tian Yang turned around and returned to the cavern. He started packing up just in case, taking the spatial rings and herbs he hadn't touched since arriving at the cavern and tossing them into the spatial ring. He wanted to take the cultivation bed with him, but with it firmly rooted into the ground. Regrettably, there was nothing he could do but leave it behind. Once he was prepared, Tian Yang returned to the passage and began traversing it without looking back. After several days, Tian Yang finally reached the end of the passage, where a brilliant light pierced through the darkness. A slow breath escaped his lips as relief washed over him, his steps quickening toward the long-awaited escape from the cavern's suffocating embrace. Meanwhile, outside the mountain, two Spirit King cultivators guarded the sealed entrance to the mountain that Tian Yang had disappeared into several decades ago. "I don't get it. Why do the Immortal clans insist on guarding this mountain?" "Do you know why?" one of the guards suddenly asked, as he was never given the reason he needed to guard it. "They didn't tell you? And why are you asking this now? We've been here for almost a decade." "I don't know. Unbelievable. Anyway, there is someone inside this mountain that the Immortal clans want to capture. What? There's a person inside this mountain? I heard this place hasn't been open for decades. And for the Immortal clans to guard this place just to capture him. I can't imagine how had offended them. I can't either, but we will most likely never see this individual. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if had already perished inside. The guard halted his words but kept his mouth wide open when the sealed entrance to the mountain suddenly opened for the first time in decades. This. Tian Yang stepped out of the mountain the following moment, his eyes adjusting to the open sky as he raised an eyebrow at the sight of two cultivators standing before him with shocked expressions. He had entertained the possibility that the Immortal clans might be lying in wait, yet it did nothing to deter him. If anything, he wanted them to be there so he could immediately begin his revenge. Are you two with the Immortal clans or the 7 divine sword peaks? Tian Yang calmly asked them. In response, the guards unsheathed their weapons, the cold steel gleaming under the light as they leveled them at Tian Yang. Their expressions were tense, their stances rigid. Under the Immortal clan's orders, we are to capture you. Do not resist, or we will take you in by force. I see. All right, you can take me. Tian Yang raised his hands and surrendered himself. The guards were pleasantly surprised by how smoothly it went. However, as they took a step toward him, Tian Yang suddenly activated Limitless Sword Domain, killing the 2 guards before they could even react. So they won't let me go even after so many years, huh? Good. Very good. This will make hunting them down even more satisfactory. Tian Yang laughed as he flew away from the scene. Meanwhile, within the grand halls of the Immortal Gu clan, a lone servant stood vigil over 2 luminous jade slips, their glow pulsing faintly in the dim chamber. For years, they had remained undisturbed, carrying the essence of their owners, until now. Without warning, the light within them flickered, faded, and then vanished entirely. A heartbeat later, both jade slips cracked, the fractures spreading like veins of death before they shattered into countless fragments. When the servant, who was half asleep, saw this, he hastily ran out of the room to report the news. Chapter 1865 Heaven Refining Crystal. Chapter 1865 Heaven Refining Crystal. Patriarch Gu of the Immortal Gu clan sat in his secluded chamber, immersed in deep cultivation. The flow of qi around him was steady, his breath synchronized with the universe itself. Each inhale refined his power, and each exhale expanded his control over the profound energies of the world. Yet, in an instant, that harmony was shattered. A loud, urgent banging erupted against his door, the force behind it so jarring that it sent ripples through the qi in the chamber. His eyes snapped open, a flicker of irritation flashing across his face. Who would dare disturb him while he was cultivating? With a flick of his sleeves, the door flung open, and before the individual outside could so much as step inside or utter a single word, Patriarch Gus' voice exploded like thunder, reverberating through the halls with unrestrained fury. You better have a damn good reason for disturbing my cultivation, or I will feed you to the dogs. His piercing gaze locked onto the trembling figure before him, his presence suffocating. The servant immediately fell to his knees and reported in a trembling voice, "This lowly servant has urgent news to report. The soul-bound life jade of the 2 guards at Han Zexian's tomb had just shattered. The guards have been killed." What? Patriarch Gu instantly stood up in shock, with disbelief written all over his face. After the incident, the Immortal clans kicked everyone out of Han Zexian's tomb and sealed it so that only approved individuals could enter. In other words, the guards' deaths were no accident, and only one individual could have done it. That bastard has finally stopped hiding and crawled out of his rat hole. Patriarch Gus' voice thundered through the chamber, his fury palpable. As he seethed, a strange sensation coursed through his left arm, the very same limb Tian Yang had severed in their last encounter but was eventually healed with treasures. However, even having fully healed, he would often feel phantom pain where Tian Yang had cut, a constant reminder of his humiliation. Unfortunately for Patriarch Gu, Tian had long left Han Zexian's tomb before he could arrive, something he realized before even entering the tomb, as the guards keeping watch of the entrance were lifelessly lying on the ground. Moreover, engraved into the very earth where the guards had fallen were the ominous words, "I have returned to kill all of you." The moment Patriarch Gus' gaze fell upon them, a chilling sensation washed over him. These were not mere threats, they pulsed with raw, unbridled killing intent, so thick it seemed to seep into the surroundings, staining the very air with malice. He could also feel the deep hatred embedded in every stroke, as if Tian had carved the message not just into the ground, but into the souls of those who would read it. Despite knowing that Tian was no longer inside the tomb, Patriarch Gu still entered it and traveled to the mountain. He wanted to confirm if the door was open now that Tian had come out. Unfortunately for him, the doors had closed shortly after Tian left. He left the tomb shortly after and contacted the other immortal clans, notifying them of Tian Yang's return. After a deep slumber, Yuan woke up with a puzzled look on his face. "Why did I see Patriarch Gu in that dream?" he muttered out loud. He thought he was recalling Tian Yang's memories, but if that were the case, he wouldn't have been able to see Patriarch Gus' reaction to Tian Yang's return. This made him consider the possibility that he wasn't actually dreaming of Tian Yang's memories but someone else. There was also the possibility that he wasn't dreaming of memories but something entirely different. However, Yuan had no clue what it might be. After pondering for some time, Yuan eventually set aside his thoughts and shifted his focus to the heaven refining crystal. He had been feeding it his blood for over a year now, and the crystal looked a lot different than it did a year ago. When he first discovered it, the heaven refining crystal had been plain and devoid of any distinct features. It was an ordinary, colorless crystal. But after absorbing his blood for over a year, it had undergone a profound change. Its once lifeless surface now shimmered with a vibrant spectrum of colors, shifting and pulsating like a living entity. More than just its appearance, the crystal emanated a unique aura, a profound energy that made Yuan subconsciously revere it. "It's ready to move to step 2. After staring at the crystal for a brief moment, he pressed the crystal against his lips before pushing it inside his mouth, treating it as though it was a candy. Unlike pills, the heaven refining crystal did not dissolve upon contact with his tongue. Yet, Yuan did not hesitate. With a single, deliberate motion, he forced the crystal down his throat, swallowing it whole. The moment it passed into his body, a violent reaction erupted within him. A tidal wave of energy surged through his meridians, scorching them like divine fire, threatening to tear him apart from within. His muscles tightened, his bones groaned under immense pressure, and his very soul trembled as if the crystal were trying to refine him instead. Arg! Yuan roared as unbearable pain racked his entire being. It had been a long time since he had experienced such agony. It was so intense it felt as if every fiber of his existence was being torn apart and reforged at the same time. The heaven refining crystal, now a part of him, unleashed an uncontrollable storm of energy. His meridians twisted and expanded, his blood boiled as if ignited by flames from purgatory, and his very soul trembled. He struggled, his body convulsing, sweat pouring down like rain, but no amount of resistance could quell the sheer torment. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity. His vision blurred, his strength waned, and eventually, his consciousness slipped away. However, even in unconsciousness, the pain did not fade. It clung to him, an unrelenting force that refused to grant him even a moment of peace. Chapter 1866 Leaving the Desolate Continent. Chapter 1866 Leaving the Desolate Continent. After days of relentless pain that only grew more painful as time passed, Yuan could finally breathe as the pain slowly subsided. However, he was still too exhausted to lift a finger, much less stand up. He closed his eyes and quickly fell asleep. Once had fallen asleep, the memories returned. After Tian had left Han Zexian's tomb, he went to the nearest city within the Desolate Continent to sell some of his treasures, as he was completely broke. Besides the longevity pills and herbs had acquired from the Outer God's Cavern, Tian Yang had several spatial rings filled with treasures from the opponent's head killed inside Han Zexian's tomb, mainly from Gu Lim and his friends. Since he didn't want to risk attracting the Immortal clan's attention, Tian Yang opted to pawn the treasures for much cheaper than if had sold them at an auction. However, even when sold for cheap, the treasures earned him a lot of money, more than he ever had before, especially from selling Gu Lim's treasures. After selling all of the treasures he deemed useless, Tian Yang purchased enough appearance-altering pills to fill an entire spatial ring. Then, he rented a room at a hotel. Once he was alone and in a quiet environment, Tian Yang began pondering his next steps. He thought about returning to the Immortal Monastery, but he was now at the peak of the Immortal Ascension realm, a step away from becoming an Immortal. Unless he wanted to become the Sect leader of the Immortal Monastery, there was no reason for someone at his level to return. Moreover, had been absent from the Sect for many decades. They most likely considered me dead long ago. There's no point in going back. Even if I went back, I'd only bring my trouble to them. When he thought about returning to the Immortal Monastery, only one thing appeared in his mind. Senior son. I never got to apologize to her. Tian Yang sighed, his voice laced with regret. Memories of her flickered through his mind, her unwavering gaze, their weird relationship of disciple and sect elder, and the disappointment he had left behind. He had long since accepted the path he had chosen, but he still regretted it. If he ever returned to the Immortal Monastery, it would only be to apologize to her. Nothing more. Once Tian Yang decided that he would not return to the Immortal Monastery, he shifted his focus elsewhere. There was someone, that had lingered in his thoughts ever since he entered the Outer God's Cavern. A question that resurfaced every so often, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Once Tian Yang decided that he would not return to the Immortal Monastery, he shifted his focus elsewhere. There was someone, that had lingered in his thoughts ever since he entered the Outer God's Cavern. A question that resurfaced every so often, gnawing at the edges of his mind. What happened to Peerless after that day? I hope he's fine. The memory of their last encounter played in his mind. The only thing that somewhat eased Tian Yang's worries was the knowledge that Peerless was the young master of the Immortal Might clan. A clan of such prestige and strength would not let harm befall their heirs so easily, not even a fellow Immortal clan. And yet, despite this reassurance, an uneasy feeling still lingered in his heart. Peerless was more than just an acquaintance, he was his savior, his friend, and his sworn brother. That bond could not be ignored. Tian Yang owed him more than just fleeting concern. With a deep breath, he made his decision. I need to check on him. However, he did not know where to start. Should he visit the Immortal Might clan, or should he ask around? No, I shouldn't try to contact Peerless directly, especially when the Immortals clan knows of our connection. I'd only be bringing him trouble by doing that. Another individual suddenly came to mind. What if I asked her? Inside his mind was a beautiful woman, Ren Xia, Peerless' ex-fiancée. If I recall correctly, Ren Xia belonged to the Immortal Sword clan. Once he had a destination, Tian Yang left the hotel and made his way to the Immortal Sword clan, which was on the other side of the world. But first, he'll need to leave the Desolate continent. They should have restored the ship services by now, right? Tian Yang made his way to the docks to see if the ship services were operational. Sometime later, he confirmed that a ship would arrive in 2 weeks. Although Tian Yang could easily traverse through the sea by flying at his cultivation, he didn't know the directions and feared he might accidentally encounter the mysterious sea demon that killed Huang Shaoli's family again. Even at the peak of Immortal Ascension, Tian Yang wasn't confident he would be able to defeat that monster. After paying for a spot, Tian Yang waited for the ship to show up. 2 weeks later, when the ship finally arrived, Tian Yang boarded and began his journey back. A little over a week into the trip, while he was cultivating, a sudden announcement shattered his focus. The voice was urgent, almost desperate. This is an emergency announcement. There is a flying leviathan heading in our direction. If there are any cultivators aboard who can deal with it, please save us. Tian Yang opened his eyes as panic erupted around him. The once calm ship was now filled with the sounds of terrified passengers, their screams and frantic shouts echoing through the air. Seriously, what is with my luck? Tian Yang sighed out loud. Encountering a Leviathan was already rare enough, yet somehow, he had managed to come across 2 flying Leviathans, something even rarer, back to back. The absurdity of it all almost made him laugh. He stood up and left his room, making his way toward the deck. His steps were unhurried, his expression calm despite the chaos unfolding around him. When he arrived at the deck, Tian Yang turned to look in the direction of the flying Leviathan. Although the flying Leviathan was still a few hundred miles away, Tian Yang wasted no time. Without hesitation, he activated Limitless Sword Domain. A formless yet boundless pressure swept across the sky, and in the next instant, a single sword strike cut through the vast distance like a divine decree. The flying Leviathan never had the chance to react. Its colossal body froze mid-flight before splitting apart, its life extinguished without knowing what had transpired. Chapter 1867 Searching for Ren Xia. Chapter 1867 Searching for Ren Xia. After killing the flying Leviathan, Tian Yang turned around and calmly made his way back to his room. He neither announced his deed nor lingered to witness the aftermath. Meanwhile, the passengers remained in a state of panic, unaware the threat had already been taken care of. Unbothered by the ongoing commotion, Tian Yang simply resumed his cultivation, as if nothing had happened at all. Eventually, the captain's voice echoed through the ship once more, laced with confusion. I don't know how to say this, but it appears the flying Leviathan has disappeared. We are safe for now. The announcement did little to calm the passengers. If anything, it only deepened their bewilderment. A flying Leviathan was not a creature that simply lost interest or abandoned its prey. Once it had set its sights on something, it pursued it relentlessly until either it or its target was destroyed. Yet, against all logic, the threat had vanished without a trace. The captain's puzzlement was shared by everyone aboard, but Tian Yang, still in his room, paid it no mind. Eventually, the ship reached land safely, and the moment it docked, the passengers wasted no time rushing to board. Their fear had not fully subsided, even with the captain's reassurance. None of them had truly felt safe until their feet touched solid ground once more. Some murmured among themselves about the mysterious disappearance of the flying Leviathan, while others simply counted their blessings and hurried away without looking back. Meanwhile, Tian Yang stepped off the ship at his own pace, indifferent to the lingering tension in the air. His focus was already elsewhere, as his journey was far from over. A few days later, Tian Yang entered an unassuming building. How can I help you? A fully cloaked individual asked as he sat across from Tian Yang inside a dark room. I want to know where I can find Ren Xia from the Immortal Sword Clan, said Tian Yang. He had gone to an information broker to ask about Ren Xia's whereabouts. The cloaked individual fell silent, and the atmosphere became awkward. If you're trying to harm the young lady of the Immortal Sword Clan, you can leave now. I won't give you such information even if you kill me, since I will be a dead man the moment I assist you, said the cloaked individual. Tian Yang showed the information broker the medallion Ren Xia had given him inside Han Zexian's tomb and assured him, I am not trying to hurt her. However, the information broker wasn't buying it and said, if your medallion is real and you really know Lady Ren, then what are you doing here talking to an information broker? You should be able to contact her by yourself. I've never been to the Immortal Sword Clan, and we're only acquaintances. We barely know each other, but she gave me this medallion after I helped her with something. Tian Yang placed 1,000 spirit stones on the table and said, let me change my question. Where can I find the Immortal Sword Clan? Are you serious? Even without seeing his face, Tian Yang could tell that the information broker had a look of disbelief on his face right now. Does it look like I am joking? The information broker turned his gaze to the spirit stones on the table and swallowed nervously. After a moment of silence, he spoke, you can find the Immortal Sword Clan at the Sword Blossom City. Since this was public information, the information broker didn't mind revealing it to Tian Yang. He only hoped that nothing would happen to Ren Xia in the near future. Tian didn't say anything else. Not even a thank you. He stood up and left the next moment. A few months later, after using several teleportation arrays and traveling from city to city, Tian finally arrived at Sword Blossom City, a place that lay on the opposite side of the world from where his journey had begun. Once inside the city, it didn't take long for Tian to locate the Immortal Sword Clan's residence. It was impossible to miss, as they occupied nearly half of the city. After walking around for a while, Tian finally approached one of the guards stationed at one of the many entrances to the Immortal Sword Clan's vast residence. The guard, clad in traditional sword-engraved armor, stood with an imposing stance, his gaze sharp and unwavering. "Excuse me, I am looking for Lady Ren," Tian said. "Why are you looking for the young lady? Who are you, and what is your relationship with her?" the guard asked. It was common for young masters from around the world to show up at the Immortal Sword Clan's gates, all seeking an audience with Ren Xia in their relentless attempts to court her. So, the guard instinctively assumed Tian was just another one of them. Tian retrieved Ren Xia's medallion and said, "I'm an acquaintance of Lady Ren, and I am here to discuss business with her. Unfortunately, this is the most I can share with you." The guard instinctively straightened his back and fixed his demeanor after seeing the medallion. "May I inspect the medallion, esteemed guest?" "Go ahead." Tian handed the medallion to him. Although he trusted Ren Xia to a certain extent, he wouldn't be surprised if she had given him a fake medallion to mess with him. However, a few moments later, the guard spoke, "I have confirmed the medallion's authenticity. That said, the young lady is currently not home. If you wish to meet her, you will have to wait for her to return, or you can go find her at the Celestial Sword Sect. If you decide to wait, I can notify the young lady of your arrival. However, I cannot guarantee you that she will return in a timely manner since she is a very busy individual." "The Celestial Sword Sect, right? I will go to her." "Thank you." Tian gave a slight nod to the guard before turning around and disappearing into the crowd. Chapter 1868 Meeting Ren Xia Again. Chapter 1868 Meeting Ren Xia Again. After Tian left the Immortal Sword Clan's residence, the guard notified Ren Xia of the situation in advance through her communication jade slip. "A business partner with my medallion, huh?" Ren Xia was puzzled after receiving this news. Although she had business partners, she couldn't recall giving any of them her medallion. As a matter of fact, she hadn't given out a medallion for the last 50 years. When Ren Xia asked for a description of the man, the guard described Tian in his disguise. Naturally, Ren Xia didn't recognize this description and only found the situation more puzzling. "A man with my medallion and claiming to be a business partner, huh? How interesting." Thus, Ren Xia patiently waited for her mysterious business partner at the Celestial Sword Sect. A few weeks later, Tian arrived at the Celestial Sword Sect. The Celestial Sword Sect was one of the top sects in the Divine Heavens during the Primordial Era, its prestige and influence rivaling even the 7 Divine Sword Peaks. Like the 7 Divine Sword Peaks, the Celestial Sword Sect specialized in sword cultivation, but their philosophies differed greatly. While the 7 Divine Sword Peaks emphasized raw power, overwhelming force, and unshakable might, the Celestial Sword Sect cultivated a style that was elegant, fluid, and swift, like a blade of light cutting through the heavens. Their techniques were said to be as graceful as flowing water yet as deadly as a falling star, embodying both beauty and lethality in perfect harmony. This elegant and fluid swordsmanship naturally attracted more female sword cultivators. Because of this, the majority of the Celestial Sword Sect's population was female, setting it apart from other top-ranking sects of the Divine Heavens. Though not exclusively a sect for women, it had long been recognized as a haven for female swordmasters, producing some of the most powerful and revered swordswomen in history. Tian approached their entrance, which was guarded by 2 female disciples. "I am looking for Lady Ren Xia from the Immortal Sword Clan." Tian showed the guards the medallion as he spoke. Since the disciples couldn't determine whether the medallion was real or fake, they had no choice but to notify a sect elder for assistance. Under normal circumstances, the guards would have allowed Tian Yang to enter the sect without much issue. However, this situation was different. Ren Xia was the young lady of the Immortal Sword clan. Because of her exalted status, the Celestial Sword sect treated her differently, enforcing stricter protocols and ensuring that only those who passed their scrutiny could approach her. A sect elder arrived half an hour later and asked Tian Yang a few questions before leaving to contact Ren Xia. "Lady Ren, there is someone who wishes to see you. He has your medallion and claims to be a business partner," the sect elder notified Ren Xia. "Should I bring him to you?" "Yes, but bring him to the 7th Celestial Peak. I'll be waiting for him at the Blossom Garden there," said Ren Xia. "I understand. I'll bring him to you immediately." Even sect elders had to act like servants before the presence of the immortal clans. Sometime later, the sect elder led Tian Yang to the Blossom Garden in the 7th Celestial Peak. The Blossom Garden was a tranquil retreat where disciples went to relax and meditate. Nestled atop a large hill, the garden was adorned with a variety of rare and exotic plants, their fragrances blending into the crisp mountain air. At the very peak of the hill, a massive cherry blossom tree stood in full bloom, its delicate pink petals drifting gracefully with the wind, painting the landscape in soft, fleeting beauty. Right beside the cherry blossom tree stood a small pavilion, its elegant structure blending seamlessly with the serene beauty of the garden. Inside, a single table sat at the center, surrounded by jade chairs carved with intricate patterns that reflected the refined aesthetic of the Celestial Sword sect. However, what drew Tian Yang's attention the most was that one of the chairs was already occupied. The figure seated there exuded an air of quiet authority, her presence effortlessly commanding the space around them. It had been over 50 years since Tian Yang had last seen Ren Xia inside Han Zexian's tomb. Back then, she had already been a beauty, but she had matured into an even more breathtaking presence since then. Her once youthful features had refined, exuding a quiet grace and confidence that only time and experience could forge. Her pink hair fluttered gently in the breeze, catching the soft light of the cherry blossoms, creating a mesmerizing contrast against the serene backdrop of the garden. As she turned her gaze toward the sect elder, her expression remained calm yet commanding. "Thank you." Her voice was smooth and composed, carrying the elegance befitting someone of her status. The sect elder gave a respectful nod, but she made no move to leave. Instead, she remained in place, her presence unwavering. It was clear she had no intention of stepping away. Ren Xia, however, didn't object. She, too, was wary of Tian Yang's identity, and allowing the sect elder to stay only reinforced her caution. Turning her gaze back to Tian Yang, her sharp eyes studied him from head to toe, a quiet scrutiny that carried both curiosity and suspicion. Finally, she spoke, her voice composed. "I do not have the best memory, so I apologize if this may come across as rude, but, could you jog my memory with your name?" There was no hostility in her tone, but neither was there warmth. "I would like to speak in private," Tian Yang said as he placed her medallion on the table. Ren Xia instantly confirmed that the medallion was real with a glance, but she still didn't realize Tian Yang's true identity. "A name," she repeated in a firm tone. Instead of answering with his name, Tian Yang simply spoke the name of a technique. Ethereal Blossom Sword Dance. The moment those words left his lips, Ren Xia's eyes widened in shock and disbelief, and a particular individual appeared in her mind. "Impossible," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Chapter 1869 Meeting Ren Xia Again, 2. Chapter 1869 Meeting Ren Xia Again, 2. The moment the sect elder noticed Ren Xia's abnormal reaction, her instincts flared. Without hesitation, she moved swiftly to Ren Xia's side, her expression sharp with vigilance. In a single motion, she drew her weapon, the cold gleam of her blade reflecting the gentle light of the cherry blossoms. She leveled the tip of the sword directly at Tian Yang, her voice filled with suspicion and authority. "Who are you?" Her stance was unwavering, her aura surging as she prepared for any possible threat. Before Tian could even react, Ren Xia swiftly intervened. She reached out and pressed her hand firmly on the sect elders, forcing the blade to lower. "It's okay," she said, her voice calm but still shaky. "He's nobody suspicious. Can you give us some privacy?" The sect elder's eyes flickered with hesitation. Ren Xia's reaction had been far from normal, and now she was suddenly vouching for this stranger. After a brief moment of tension, the sect elder reluctantly sheathed her sword, though her sharp gaze remained locked onto Tian. "As you wish, Lady Ren." With that, she stepped away, though it was clear she wouldn't go far. Now, only Tian and Ren Xia remained beneath the cherry blossom tree. Once Ren Xia had full control over her emotions again, she sat back down and spoke. "Is it really you?" Tian sat down and calmly responded, 2 weeks. His answer to her question was the exact amount of time it took him to learn the technique. "I see. So it really is you." Ren Xia's voice was soft. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. "How long has it been since then? I thought you would never make it out of that place alive." She had never expected to see him again after learning about his situation with the Immortal clans, and yet, here he was. However, Tian ignored her question and went straight to the topic. "I didn't come here to reminisce. Peerless. What happened to him after I entered the mountain? Where is he now?" Ren Xia's body trembled again after being reminded of someone she had forced herself to forget. "Sorry, but I do not know." "Do you really expect me to believe that?" Tian frowned. "Why do you expect me to know?" "Because you're his fiancé." "Ex-fiancé. We broke our engagement at the tomb. Did you forget?" "That doesn't mean anything, nor does it change the fact that your clans are close enough to engage the two of you. There's no way you wouldn't know about his situation." Ren Xia let out a quiet sigh, her gaze drifting slightly as if recalling a distant memory. "I truly don't know what happened to him," she said, her voice genuine, devoid of pretense. "All I know is that he was taken away by the patriarchs of the other immortal clans. I haven't heard from or about him since then." "And you never bothered to ask about him?" Tian frowned. "Why would I?" Ren Xia shrugged, her expression indifferent. "Besides our forced engagement, our relationship could barely be considered more than acquaintances. Even now, I couldn't care less about his situation." Tian didn't doubt Ren Xia's claims. From the way she spoke, from the casual indifference in her tone, he could tell that she truly didn't care about Peerless. Even if she were to learn that Peerless had died, Tian had a feeling that she wouldn't grieve, nor would she feel any sorrow. To her, he was nothing more than a name from the past, a person she had once been tied to by obligation rather than choice. "But what is this?" Ren Xia suddenly said, a hint of amusement creeping into her voice. "We haven't seen each other in over half a century, and the first thing you talk about is another person, my ex-fiancé, no less?" She leaned slightly forward, her sharp gaze locking onto Tian, her expression unreadable, profound, teasing, yet carrying an undertone of something more. "Why don't you ask about me?" she continued, her tone light yet deliberate. "Like how I've been doing, or whether I've found another partner or not." "I'm not interested in your affairs," Tian coldly responded. However, this only made Ren Xia more aggressive. "You know, I would occasionally think about you, even though I was confident you were dead or would be soon. I knew you were a special individual, but even I couldn't have anticipated how special you were. How did you escape the tomb? I know the Immortal Gu clan has that place watched around the clock despite how long it's been." Yet, Tian didn't play into her game. His expression remained calm and unwavering as he replied, "I'll tell you if you help me acquire information on Peerless." Ren Xia blinked before a playful smirk appeared on her lips. Leaning back slightly, she crossed her arms in amusement. "I don't want to," she said in a teasing, sing-song tone, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Even the coldest of men would have had their demeanor soften at the sight of Ren Xia acting so playfully. Her teasing tone, her mischievous smirk, and the way she carried herself with effortless charm could easily smite any man. Yet, Tian only frowned. "If I recall correctly, you still owe me a favor for helping you acquire the ethereal blossom sword dance. I am here to claim that debt." After being reminded of her debt to him, Ren Xia's playful demeanor vanished. Her expression hardened, the amusement in her eyes fading as she straightened her back, exuding the cold, commanding presence that befitted her status. She stared at him with an icy gaze, her voice devoid of the light-hearted tone she had moments ago. "And what are you going to do if I refuse?" she challenged, her words sharp and deliberate. "Since you don't want to have anything to do with me, I no longer have a reason to keep you around." A pause. Then, her next words carried a thinly veiled threat. "Hell, I might even capture you right now and gift you to the Immortal Gu clan as a present." Tian didn't immediately respond, but the atmosphere around them had changed drastically. Chapter 1870 Meeting Ren Xia Again, 3. Chapter 1870 Meeting Ren Xia Again, 3. When the sect elder sensed the tense atmosphere between Tian and Ren Xia from afar, she thought about approaching them but hesitated. Just as the sect elder took a step forward, Tian suddenly released a chuckle. His voice was calm, yet there was an undeniable confidence in his tone. "You'll capture me and gift me to the Immortal Gu clan? Sorry, but I don't think you're qualified to do such a thing." Ren Xia frowned, and her eyes narrowed. "What did you just say?" "Am not qualified," she repeated, her tone turning sharp. "Who do you think you are?" "You were just a peak spirit king 50 years ago," she stated. "I don't know what happened inside the mountain, but I highly doubt you've managed to surpass me in cultivation in such a short time." Ren Xia's cultivation had already reached the peak of Divine Lord when she first met Tian inside Han Zexian's tomb. Now, after 50 years, she had ascended even further, reaching the 6th level of Divine King. Her growth was nothing short of astounding. In just half a century, she had achieved what would take most cultivators centuries to accomplish. Within her generation, she was virtually unparalleled. Only the top geniuses from the other immortal clans could rival her, and even among them, few could claim to be superior. As for Tian his cultivation was only at the Spirit King, not even close to stepping into the divine realm. Compared to Ren Xia, the gap between them should have been insurmountable. Moreover, unlike her, Tian had no access to vast resources or powerful cultivation techniques provided by a prestigious clan. Most importantly, he lacked the talents, which might as well be non-existent compared to Ren Xia. By all logic and reason, there was simply no way for Tian to surpass her. At least, that's what Ren Xia truly believed. Hearing her words, Tian smiled and said, "You're only at the 6th level of Divine King. I can kill you with a single flick to the head with my current strength." Ren Xia's eyes widened slightly, her initial shock quickly replaced by disbelief. "You're bluffing," she snapped, refusing to accept his claim. Yet, despite her immediate rejection, a sliver of doubt crept into her mind. For Tian to instantly perceive her exact cultivation level, it could only mean two things. Either he had already reached close to her level, or he had surpassed it. "I would reveal my cultivation to prove myself, but I don't want to cause a scene. However, if you're serious about your threat, go ahead and try capturing me. I didn't escape Han Zexian's tomb by chance." Ren Xia clenched her fists under the table and asked, "And what are you going to do to me? Kill me?" "If I have to," Tian instantly responded without an ounce of hesitation in his voice. "My family will avenge my death even if it's the last thing they do. I am already being hunted by several immortal clans. Having another one on that list won't make much difference. I will destroy them all eventually." Tian's bold words would have enraged anyone from the immortal clans, especially someone of Ren Xia's status. To claim he would destroy not one but multiple immortal clans, it was nothing short of madness. And yet, Ren Xia couldn't help but smile. A smirk tugged at her lips as she shook her head, a glimmer of amusement flickering in her eyes. "You're really one crazy son of a bitch," she said, her tone half mocking, half admiring. "But that's exactly what I like about you." Tian Yang's level of madness and defiance was exceedingly rare, and for someone like Ren Xia, who was attracted to such personalities, it was an irresistible charm. "All right," she released a defeated sigh. "I'll try to find out what happened to Peerless, but don't expect much." "Thank you." Tian Yang nodded. "Do you have a communication jade slip for me to contact you when I have the information?" Ren Xia then asked. "No, I don't." "Then here is mine." Ren Xia tossed a jade slip at him, and it was not just any ordinary communication jade slip but one she would only use for emergency contact. "I'll contact you when I have the information on Peerless. Unfortunately, I cannot guarantee you any time frames on when it'll be available." "I can wait," Tian Yang said. Ren Xia stood up and began approaching him. "So, what are you going to do now? Do you have a place to stay? My house is pretty spacious, you know." Tian Yang raised an eyebrow at Ren Xia's ridiculous offer, his expression clear with disbelief. "Are you seriously asking someone who's being hunted by the Immortal clans to stay with you?" he asked. "I even threatened you not long ago. You're just asking for trouble now. You're worried about me? Maybe I do have a chance, after all." Ren Xia chuckled. "Sorry, but that's not possible." "Why do you say that? Do you already have a partner? You don't give such vibes." Ren Xia looked genuinely surprised. "I did, but she's no longer in this world," Tian Yang admitted. "Is that so? You have my condolences. I'm leaving now." Just as Tian Yang prepared to leave, Ren Xia suddenly grabbed his arm and pulled him back. Caught off guard, he instinctively turned his head. "What are you?" Before he could finish, Ren Xia's face was already close to his. And then she swiftly leaned in, pressing a soft kiss against his cheek. The unexpected gesture left a fleeting warmth on Tian Yang's skin. For a moment, there was silence. As Tian Yang opened his mouth, Ren Xia smiled and said, "I'll see you later." And before he could respond, she turned around and flew away, her figure vanishing in an instant, moving so fast that it almost seemed like she was fleeing the scene. The Sect elder, who had just witnessed the shocking scene unfold before her eyes, could only stand there, completely dumbfounded. They were lovers? She cried inwardly, struggling to process what she had just seen. That explains their awkward atmosphere. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.